Okay. Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, and we will call the regular meeting of the Township Board of the Charter Township of Meridian to order. This is our March 18th, 2025 regular meeting. Our first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Will all who are able please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on our agenda this evening is roll call. Clerk Dumas, will you please call the roll?
Treasurer Duchesne.
Here.
Trustee Wilson.
Here.
Trustee Trezise.
Here.
Clerk Demas here. Trustee Sunland. Here. Trustee Lenz.
Here.
Supervisor Hendrickson.
Here.
Everyone is present.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is item 4A, presentations. Actually, we have two presentations this evening. First up, we have from CATA, Brad Funkhauser, our CEO, and Andrew Breschke, the Deputy CEO.
I should let the deputy know that we've been called to the podium.
Oh, boy.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Brad Funkhauser, CEO of CATA. Thank you for the invitation, and hello to the new trustees, board member on CATA, Treasurer Phil Duchesne, and also Steve Agnosi, who you appointed last year. I also had the pleasure of meeting and reuniting with Tim Dempsey, your new manager. I've known Tim for a very long time. In fact, I said last week we're cool planning buddies, so great decision. I look forward to working with you as well. We're going to give you an update on CATA and primarily the Ready Ride service, and we'll answer any questions you have. I should note for you that since the pandemic, transportation, I should say all business has really changed, hasn't it? The work environment has changed, hiring workers has changed, the way people want to move across the region has changed, everything has changed, and so we have to change with it. And one of my favorite books that I got when I graduated college from somebody in my family who I'm sure was giving me sage advice was "Oh, the Places You'll Go," if you remember the book. And I think very apropos now is that when we look back, it's really all the places we've been in the last 4 or 5 years. So we have an exciting update. If transit updates can be exciting, we think so. I'm going to turn it over to my deputy, Andrew Breschke, and he will update you, and then we'll answer questions. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you again for inviting us. Phil, as a member of our board, you and I have worked together a long time on the Ready Ride issues and some of the fixed route questions and comments, and appreciate all your feedback and support over the years. As Brad mentioned, I give a quick update on the Meridian Ready Ride service. For a little background, the township entered into an agreement with CATA in 2000, so 25 years ago, to provide the Ready Ride service. Ready Ride is a general public curb-to-curb or small bus demand response service. We were happy to be a part of 2 10-year agreements with the township, and then most recently a 5-year agreement that went from 2019 through 2024, and we continue to provide that service for the township today. The service operates Monday through Saturday, and Monday through Friday it operates 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. There's a total of 6 runs or as many as 4 buses in the township at one time. So to cover that span of service, we have 6 pieces of work for drivers, but during the peak we have as many as 4 in the township at one time. On Saturdays we operate from 9 to 5 in the township, and customers can book rides by calling our paratransit office at 394 CATA or by using the My Ride CATA app, which we are proud to say is very successful. They can see the bus in real time and book the ride that way. I should point out it is a very desirable service for our bus operators. We have very senior bus drivers who bid the Ready Ride here in the township, and they're proud of that. They're very proud of the service they provide, and as a secret rider myself who will hop on the buses, of course they all know me, it's not that secret, I can tell you it's a very good service that we are proud to provide. Booking hours, I should point out, are 6:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. Mr. Opsmer passed out some slides. I apologize. I did not bring a PowerPoint with me, but some hard copies are going around, and you can follow along as we go through. I'm on the second slide now, showing the ridership. This is monthly ridership, actual rides taken. A few slides later, we'll get into the rides booked. For those in the audience, a typical monthly ridership on the Ready Ride is anywhere from 1,000 to 1,400 rides. And in fiscal year '24, the Meridian Ready Ride provided 14,530 rides. The next slide, I have a pie chart for you. This looks at fiscal year '24, October 1st of 2023 through September 30th of '24. You see the breakdown of the demographics. So seniors or people with disabilities are broken out. People with disabilities account for 63%. And to be clear, the SpecTran service here in the township has the same fare of $2.50 per ride. So our customers see both services as being interchangeable. Additionally, 6% are youth, 7% are free for various reasons. We have the full fare adults at 11%, and then seniors making up 13% of the ridership last year. Moving on to the next slide, we have an Excel sheet titled January 23 through February 25, Ready Ride Booking Analysis. And I'll just run through the columns across the top for you briefly. Obviously, in the first column, we have the month going back to January of '23. And the second column, we have total trips booked. It's important to point out these are trips booked, not actually taken. Capacity is column 3, and column 4% of capacity denials to total bookings. This is an important column or set of columns to point out because, as some may remember, we were turning people away because we could not get them on the bus at the time they wanted to go. Since January of 2023, we are proud to say we have had 0 trips denied due to capacity. And that's a testament to the township being in tune with what the customers are looking for and their support of CATA to help us put out more buses and make sure that people get where they go when they need to go. Next, we see client refusal. That accounts for customers who were offered an alternative time, and they said, I don't want the time. But because we haven't offered other times, everyone got to go when they wanted to, there were 0 client refusals. Moving along, you see a column that is called canceled. That's the portion of rides that cancel their trip up to 4 hours before. So anything within 4 hours, they can book same day for the ride. Up to 4 hours before, if it's within 4 hours of their scheduled trip, it is what we call a no-show, and you see the no-show columns there for each month. And then lastly, the days of operation per month. Moving along to the next slide, we see the additional locations. I should point out these are locations that are not within the geographic boundary of the township. The Township Board had requested us to serve these dating back to 2018. And the ridership is broken down as follows. For the last fiscal year, 2024, Bath Meyer, 1,372 trips. College Fields, 143 for the year. The MSU Clinical Center, 65. Costco, which to our surprise is proving less popular than we thought, 53 trips for the fiscal year. The East Lansing Aquatic Center, 0 for the year. And finally, McLaren Greater Lansing, which was only just added in 2023, we had 100. If we look at the period since October 1 of '24 through January of this year, the numbers are 669 over that period for Bath Meyer, 22 for College Fields, 23 for the Clinical Center, 37 for Costco, 0 for the Aquatic Center, and 26 to the hospital. Moving along to my second to last slide. This slide is entitled Meridian Ready Ride Ridership through the extended hours, August 18 through February of '25. These are the periods of time that the township requested back in August of 2018. And as you see, reading the columns across from left to right, in the morning, the time was added from, we used to start at 8:30 in the morning. Since 2018, we're proud to start at 7 a.m. And during that period of time, 7 a.m. to 8:30, we had a total number of trips of 5,753. And again, that's over the larger period, looking back since the township extended those hours. So a lot of rides, but in fairness, that's also close to 7 years of trips as well. And also the township added hours in the evening from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. And over that period, just shy of 9,000 trips have been taken. Again, a testament to your leadership and support of CATA and letting us put buses out there when the customers aren't demanding it. So thank you very much. And then lastly, moving on to the last period of time, my last slide, the periods of time listed show what is traditionally been the time when students are let out of school. So some of you may recall we went through a period of time where students leaving or going to schools were really filling up the Ready Rides. The fare was changed in 2019. And during the school dismissal period of 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., we see a total number of trips of just shy of 27,000 trips from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. This is Monday through Friday since August of 18, when we had issues with the students and capacity on the buses, which we no longer have. So I understand it's a lot of data. I apologize that it was not put up on a PowerPoint. I hope this was sufficient, but of course, always happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions or comments at this time? Trustee Lentz.
Thank you for the presentation. You had mentioned a number, I wrote down over 14,024. I didn't get the exact number, but does that include those extended hours trips, or is that only during the standard hours?
It does. And just for reference, in fiscal '24, we provided 14,532 trips on the Ready Ride. And yes, it includes all those extended hours and the additional locations outside of the township.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. As a comment, I have used CATA for most of my adult life, time or another, going to Lugnuts games from the Meridian Mall. So I appreciate the service that CATA provides to township residents, and clearly there's a high number of folks that utilize it as well. So,
thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
I just wanted to remind everyone that Meridian Cares, which is our social services arm, CATA provides us with discounted bus passes that we have available for our low-income residents, and it makes the ability to take a trip much easier. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're most welcome, and thank you for mentioning that. The standard fare on the Ready Ride is $2.50, which is double the fixed route fare of $1.25. The discounted rate, as you referenced, is half of that, so $1.25.
Other board members? Treasurer Shane.
I think you cut that rate again in half, because I know we sell a lot of bus passes to seniors for $6 for 10 rides. So it's a 60-cent ride, which is very affordable for our residents. I want to thank you, CATA, for participating since 2016 in our several things that have helped the township to be prosperous and redevelop our commercial areas. You participated in the Four Corners of Okemos TIF, tax increment financing, the Four Corners in Hazlet as well, and more recently the corridor improvement area, which is to say you gave up current revenue for the period of the tax increment financing to benefit the blighted areas and allow them to come back. We appreciate your participation in that. More to the point, in this past year, you've agreed to provide Ready Ride service without a renewal of the contract, without a renewal of the millage, at the same extended service you've been providing. And that amounts to about $500,000 savings for our residents per year, over $10 a year per resident they're saving, and yet they still not only have Ready Ride, but they have the expanded Ready Ride. You've been a real partner with us, and thank you for your participation in our TIFs, and also providing Ready Ride for the, not with additional millage, but for the basic CATA millage, which we of course, participating in. So thank you for your participation. You're helping to make Meridian come back in our commercial areas, and you're keeping our tax rates lower. Now, if you just talk to the Ingham County Board of Commissioners about doing something similar, we might actually get some tax cuts around here, but that hasn't happened yet.
Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate that. It is truly a mutual partnership. I spent a number of my years working in the paratransit office, and Craig Frazier, our current manager, Todd Brooks, and on behalf of our entire paratransit team, some of whom you interact with, it truly is a mutual partnership, and we see the benefit, not just for the township, but for those who rely on us every day to get where they need to go. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your support, Mr. Supervisor. Ridership overall, since the pandemic, across the system is back to about 80%, which is not bad for a transit agency, but it presents a challenge. And so partnerships like this, where transit is not one size fits all, there's not one shelter, there's not one vehicle, and what we have found in launching First Last Mile, it's called microtransit, which will be coming to a neighborhood near you soon. We're testing it right now, and that is really getting folks into the fixed route system from areas that traditionally are underserved. So it isn't always a large bus going up and down, and it becomes more efficient. So the partnership, and I also want to compliment the board for pushing us to do the MyRides application. You wanted that technology. It was a great partnership, and now everyone in the system benefits from that. So thank you for the partnership.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate the
You bet.
presentation.
Have a good night.
Next on our agenda is item 4B, a 2025 water and sewer rates presentation from Deputy Manager Dan Opsimer.
Good evening, Supervisor Hendrickson and board members. Just one moment here real quick. All right, so this evening we are going to go over a review of the 2025 water and sewer rates. I'll be brief as I know you have a long agenda this evening. So just a quick summary kind of all the subject matter that we'll cover. So our water and sewer rates did increase effective January 1st of 2025. The two primary factors contributing to that was the inflation that we have experienced post-pandemic, and then also the capital improvements that we have been designing and working to construct at the the WRF, jointly owned by the City of East Lansing, Michigan State, and the Township, and also the Elmsville Water Plant, jointly owned by the City of East Lansing and Meridian Township. So effective on January 1, our water rate, the consumption charge per 1,000 gallons, increased from $5.96 to $7.15. That was a 20% increase, as we did notice as we were reviewing our costs and also our fund balance. We needed funds far more on the water distribution side than the sanitary sewer side. On the sanitary sewer side for the consumption charge, we increased that 5%, so $7.58 to $7.96 from 24 to 25. And then we also increased the ready-to-serve fee from $12 to $24. Now, on the ready-to-serve fee, as many other water systems have done across the country, we adopted the AWWA's recommended sliding scale based on the size or the diameter of the water service line and the meter serving that customer. So for instance, if you have a large business or an industrial business that has a 4-inch service line, the infrastructure required to supply that customer with water is significantly greater across the board than, say, a single-family household with a 5/8 service line and meter. And the sliding scale that the AWWA recommends nationwide kind of accounts for that fact to make sure that everyone is sharing equitably in the cost to maintain the system. So I'll give just one brief example. A townhome building that has 8 units in it would traditionally have a 2-inch service. So their ready-to-serve fee now would be $192. If you divide that by the 8 units, it's $24 per unit, the same as a single-family home pays $24. And then just looking at the 2025 rates at large, and we'll revisit this at the end of the presentation briefly, Our water and sewer rates remain the lowest in the region by a considerable margin, and we're somewhere in the bottom 3 percentile statewide. And here's a comparison of the township's average bill for a single-family home that's using 12,500 gallons per billing cycle, which is about the average that a single-family home would use across the system. And you can see that if you were to move to Grand Ledge and become a customer of their system, your bill would automatically double. And for the other systems in the region, their rates are 13 to 66% higher than ours. So the inflationary costs. As I noted in the summary overview, we have seen the cost to maintain the system increase dramatically. Specifically looking at water main, for instance, the cost prior to 2021 per linear foot for water main was $100 to $130. And it has increased now to $180 to $280. One of our bid tabs from last year, we actually had a quote for $416 per linear foot. It's about 4 times what it was in 2020 or 2021. And then looking at the sanitary sewer side. So across Meridian Township's system, we have 31 lift stations. So these are pumping stations where we can't keep flow maintained with gravity. And so we have to have a pumping station to pump the raw sewage uphill where then gravity can take back over. So the cost to maintain or replace those lift stations, which they do require replacement every 50 to 75 years approximately. Prior to the pandemic, we were looking at $400,000 to $500,000 per lift station. Today, the cost is about $740,000 to $1.5 million. We are currently in the process of replacing the lift station at the Lake Lansing boat launch. That project is coming in around $1 million, right in the middle of that range. And then lastly, the capital improvements to the Elmswell Water Plant and the WRF. So the other reason for the increase is the debt costs that the township is incurring as a joint owner of the Elmswell Water Plant. And so just to highlight the 3 primary capital investments that we made through the recent improvements, we added well capacity through the purchase of 3 new wells in Bath Township. We acquired these through the BWL as they did not have a use based on their proximity to their system. The water quality from these wells is exceptional. The second was the construction of a second reservoir. When the Elmswell Water Plant was first conceived of and designed, it was designed such that it could be replicated or doubled. So you could double the capacity of the water plant. That was based on very optimistic population projections for Meridian Township. We're never going to need to double it. But one thing that we did do was construct a second reservoir as a redundancy in the system so that when the existing aging reservoir needs to be maintained, we can take it out of service and we have a backup reservoir. And that's also increasing the amount of water that we have ready to distribute to customers. So when we do go through, let's say, a drought in the summer, we will have more water supply on hand to put into the system when water demand can change dramatically during a drought. The last, and perhaps the most important, was looping the raw water main. If you'll recall, we had 2 phases of construction where we installed raw water main from the interurban crossing on Okemos Road to Lake Lansing and Okemos Road, where we had that intersection closed in 2023. That was looping our raw water main on that route so that as our raw water main ages and we experience leaks, we can loop around it and still supply the plant with water. So another important redundancy in the system. And this was actually the first major capital improvement that we have done to the Elmswell Water Plant since 1993. So about 30 years. And then for the water resource recovery facility, and this one again is owned by MSU, the City of East Lansing, and Meridian Township. So a little bit different ownership than the East Lansing Meridian Water, the Elmswell Water Plant. But for the WRF, we doubled the capacity of how much wastewater can be treated. The city of East Lansing still has a lot of combined storm and sanitary sewer. So when we do have storm events, we have to take in that storm water. So doubling the capacity of the WRF was critical to making sure that we can treat all that water during storm events. The WRF had not had major capital improvements since 1973. So it was getting up there in age. And then for both the Elmswell plant and the WRF, there were a lot of mechanical components to both facilities that had reached the end of their useful life, pumps, to give an example, and those were replaced in many cases through the projects as well. And then just kind of recapping back to the rate comparison across the Lansing region, after we've gone through that history and context for the rate increase, just a reminder that, you know, we still remain one of the lowest in the Lansing region and one of the lowest in the state of Michigan. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions? Trustee Trezise.
As I recall, when we discussed this water rate change, the information we received is the rates had not increased significantly for a long period of time. Do you recall how long that was?
The prior 2 years, 23 and 24, there were meaningful increases in rates. So the ready-to-serve fee went from $5 to $12 from 22 to 23. And then this is where I'm going to perhaps mix up the consumption per 1,000 gallon increases. But we did a 7% and a 10%.
Okay.
But for instance, the BWL, which is significantly above Meridian Township, Lansing's interesting because they do their own sanitary. So the city does the sanitary sewer, BWL does the water supply. So they've kind of separated those utilities. But the Lansing rates here reflect the BWL for water and the city for sewer. They've been, even with them being right in the middle there, they have done 3 consecutive years at 9% and change. So everyone is adjusting for the same reasons that we're talking about tonight. The cost to maintain the system has increased dramatically. So we're not really, we have done meaningful increases the prior 2 years. Prior to that, though, it was 1.2, 2.3 roughly % increases for the 7 roughly years preceding 23.
That was my recollection. There was a considerable amount of time where increases did not meet the needs. And so we're falling further and further behind as far as maintenance, repairs, replacement.
Yeah.
And it just came to a head at the end of the year.
Yeah, this board has been a good steward of the enterprise funds and the utility in general. But yes, there was a period where our rate increases were very small and very modest, and they weren't even keeping up with water conservation. Because we have observed over a period of time, the last 20 years, 25 years roughly, customers have been conserving water, which is wonderful from an environmental standpoint. We want to see that. The double-edged sword to that, though, is that the cost to maintain the system is a fixed cost. So the mains still have to be replaced, even if you're conserving water, right? So rates do have to account for that. So in the years where we were doing, you know, a 1.25 or a 1.5% increase, if water conservation was, you know, about the same, we were really not making up any ground.
Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. Our rates are about 25% less than East Lansing's rates, and yet they share the same water. They co-own the water plant with us, and we use the same sanitary sewer facility. I think it's another tribute to the stewardship of this board and past boards that we haven't used water rates as a revenue source for the township. We're charging actual costs with capital improvements, money set aside, because using the same facilities East Lansing does, we could say, well, there's their rate at 264. We could match that, but this board hasn't done that over the years. We've charged more actual costs, and now we're getting closer to them with this additional money. But that's more than a $50 a month saving for our residents. That this this rate covers just the water and sewer for our townships, and it's not adding additional revenue to the general fund or other uses like that.
Thank you. Trustee Sunland.
What was the average quarterly bill before the rate increases?
Website is going to be changed over, but it's about 16% less than that. It was like $188 last year, I believe, is what you would have seen listed right here. So last year, I believe this number was $188 and change, or $189 and change.
Thank you.
Trustee Lentz.
I wanted to thank you, Dan, for, when I was here with the township, spending the full day, you showing me the plan, East Lansing and Meridian. And I would encourage all the board members to try to find time, if you haven't, to go see that. It is a modern marvel that, we're able to have water on demand as easily as we do. So, really, I just would love to find a time when everyone else on the board could see and experience that conversation like I did. Just wanted to say that.
Trustee Wilson.
I just wanted to say thank you, Dan. We've had a number of inquiries lately when people have received their quarterly water bill. This is a great explanation for anyone. I hope you'll have this available for residents if they come in to make an inquiry about their water and sewer bills.
Absolutely. And the presentation is already in the board's packet. It was updated earlier today, so that has been refreshed. And I will also just show our customers very briefly on our homepage. You can just search utility billing. It will be the first item under the search results. And if you go to the water and sewer FAQ, there's the rate increase flyer, but more so the FAQ document has more details that customers can review. And at the very end, we do have our rate table. And it's also embedded here in the drop-down menu.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Deputy Manager Opsmer, the timing of this, in addition to sort of the catch-up of, sort of the many years of modest increases over time, is also germane because, we experienced a lot of growth some decades ago in Meridian Township. And I expect that came with expansion of the water and sewer system. And so in many cases, we are pushing up on the need to replace a great deal of the lift stations and the pipes that, run underneath the township. Would you say that contributes to the need for this kind of increase as well?
Yes, twofold, technically, to your point, Supervisor Hendrickson. One, when the township was growing more readily in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we had new homes coming online at a higher frequency, there's connection charges. So you kind of pay legacy costs into the system to connect. And that revenue is declining because we have fewer connections. So we have to make up that lost revenue source through the consumption charges and the ready-to-serve fees through the billing. The other factor is the age of the system. So the oldest mains in our system, sanitary and water, date back to the 60s. The original impetus to create a water and sewer utility was E. coli found in Lake Lansing. So it was septic fields around the lake that were failing, and that was the impetus to create a utility in order to clean up the watershed around the lake. And since then it has grown, and it stretches from the north end of Meridian Township all the way to the northern end of Meridian Township.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Any further questions? We appreciate you giving us the presentation tonight.
Thank you so much.
Next on our agenda is item 5, citizens address agenda items and non-agenda items. There are 2 opportunities this evening for public remarks. Members of the public who wish to address any item on our agenda or not on our agenda have an opportunity to do so at the beginning of the meeting right now or at the end of the meeting. Those who wish to address the board must complete a green card, which you can find on the table near the door, and present the card to the board or a member of the township staff prior to the comment period. When it's your turn, the supervisor, that's me, will call you up to the podium to speak to the topics indicated. While it's not required, it is helpful for the sake of our meeting minutes if you would provide your name and address for the record at the beginning of your remarks. Citizens are required to limit comments to 3 minutes. An automated system will keep track of the time, and an indicator light and beep will alert you when your time has expired. Members of the board do value public comment and input. The meeting format and rules, however, restrict board members from engaging in conversation with commenters or answering questions directly during the public comment period. Questions and concerns may be addressed by board members at a later time or referred to a member of the township staff to follow up on. Please ensure that you address all comments to the board and/or the board's chair and not to individual board members or to others in the audience. With that said, we have a number of green cards this evening. The first is Neil Bowlby. Thank you. Thank you. And then on deck after Neil, we have Matthew Clock.
Neil Bowlby, 6020 Beechwood. I'm glad to see you're having a conversation about taxes, especially with the prospect of a new senior and community center that will probably need to result in increased taxes. This is taxes for Meridian Township from my property from the years of 2000 to 2024. The full bars, including the gray part, is the actual number of dollars in a relative sense, with 2020 being, or 2000 being set to 1. The blue bars take into account inflation, which is shown by the orange line there. So inflation has increased by a factor of 82%, whereas taxes have increased by 172%. When normalized to take account of inflation. We've also put in some highlights, labels there to identify where the big jumps were in terms of taxes, the police and fire millage, the road millage increase. In the packet for today was this table showing the current and future millage rates. And boy, I'd be delighted if come 2036, I only had 4.13 mils. This table really only shows half the story because those numbers assume that the other millages that are expiring are not going to get renewed. And certainly most of them are. I would suspect that the police and fire protection millages will be renewed. All of them I've modeled here being renewed at essentially the same rate that they are when they expire, except for the local roads. Don't know if people are going to want to ante up again for more road improvements. Toward the bottom there were township millage rate. Those are the numbers from the previous table. If you take in renewals at the rates that I showed, the actual millage rates don't go so low. By 2036, it's down to 8.06% or 8.06 mils. But that doesn't show the effect of increasing property values. So I've included a factor for inflation, which gives you the Headley factor. And so actually over the next 10 years, the effective taxes are pretty much the same in 2036 as they are now in terms of dollars spent. So I'd like you to keep that in mind when you mull over how to pay for senior center and/or community center. Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew Clock, and then Christina Clock, you are next.
Matthew Clock, 4538 Seneca Drive, and I oppose ordinance 2025-3. I graduated from Okemos High School in June of 2020. I attended Michigan State University and graduated in December of 2023. Shortly after, I started working full-time at Michigan State University. Point being, with countless opportunities to leave Meridian Township, both educationally and professionally, I chose to stay. I chose to stay because I value a community that takes pride in its residents, its schools, and the environment. The applicant mentioned how this development fills the missing middle with regards to housing in Meridian Township. I'm here to tell you why that's not true, because I am the missing middle. As much as I love this community and want to set permanent roots here by purchasing a home, I can't. Why can't I? Because there are no affordable homes in Meridian Township. So instead, I will be forced to leave the community and buy my first home in a surrounding community. The missing middle aren't high-end rentals, it's affordable, single-family homes. Personal finance experts recommend that no more than 30% of your gross income should be spent on housing. Utilizing this rule, you would need an annual income of about $120,000 to afford one of the applicant's new rental units. This is not a typical income for a young adult. There needs to be more affordable, single-family homes in the township. I hope the dream of home ownership in Meridian Township is not for sale to the highest bidder. This development does not fit the surrounding community and is not needed. Please oppose this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Christina Clark and then David Clark.
Chris Clark, 4538 Seneca, speaking in opposition of ordinance 2025-03. This development will have huge negative environmental impacts and create drainage issues. Replacing 3 acres of forest with 32 multiple family units will negatively impact the drainage systems and water runoff of this area. Mr. Fiedler mentioned placing a concrete detention pond on the property line in my backyard, which brings a whole host of adverse effects. He also mentioned pumping water out into the street. Given that Dobie Road is uphill from this property, that water will likely be funneled to the lowest point on Seneca, which is my home. I again want to make it crystal clear on the public record that we have never had water flood near, around, or in our home in the 25 years we have lived there. If flooding or drainage issues do develop, that responsibility lies completely with the developer and with the township for approving the rezoning. I truly believe the most disturbing part about this entire process, though, is the fact that density changes can be made on the future land use map with no direct notification of the residents directly impacted by the change. These map changes then become the basis to justify all rezoning going forward. The only meeting where this 3-acre addition to the future land use map was discussed was the 3/27/23 Planning Commission meeting. The commission was told by township staff that previous attempts at rezoning were unsuccessful because the property wasn't in the future land use map. The rest of the extensive history of rezoning was conveniently omitted from discussion by township staff. When one of the commissioners said, "Hey, I'd like to hear from the neighbors, see what they think about the change," the response from township staff was, and I quote, "There is no requirement for 300-foot notification of a map change like this. I highly, highly recommend against singling out a map change for notification," end quote. While that might be procedurally correct, it doesn't demonstrate that we are a township that values transparency. It says just the opposite, in fact, and that is deeply, deeply disturbing. Let's talk about the opposition to this for a second. My husband and I went around the surrounding neighborhoods and knocked on a lot of doors. No, not one resident that we spoke with supports this rezoning. You would hear the same thing if you went door to door as well. You have over 100 signatures of opposition in your packet. Please consider all the individual voters that are listed there, many of whom have lived in their homes for more than 40 years and raised families here. These are the people that will be negatively impacted by this rezoning. Please consider the good of the community over the needs of one individual whose desire is to maximize profit. Thank you.
Thank you. David Clark and then Peggy Anderson.
Hi there, board members. Dave Clark, 4538 Seneca Drive in Okemos. Thank you for allowing me to speak again this evening. I oppose the Feedable Holdings rezoning request of the 4.28 acre parcel located on Dobie Road from RAA single family to RD multiple family. As my wife Chris just said, we went door to door talking with residents and we obtained 64 petition signatures not to rezone the property. We went on Seneca, Oneida, Keweenaw, Hamilton, Dobie. We went across Dobie to Forest Hills, Calgary, and Maribel Streets. I want to bring attention to the detention pond that is projected to be built in the southwest part of the property. And that's projected to be built about 10 feet from our properties on Seneca. If you support this rezoning, the 4.28 acres of water will now be purposely directed toward our backyards, which again is the lowest point on Seneca. Currently, there isn't a detention pond behind any home on Seneca. So why does the detention pond have to be built on this feedable property? That's because multiple units on this property will create water issues, and these water issues will be diverted to residential property and roads to the west. The Daniels Drain Tax Assessment Map shows properties to the north of the feedable property and also 6 homes on Seneca who are already paying the Daniels Drain Tax Assessment. I want to avoid any kind of Sprouse Drain Tax Assessment and water issues on our properties because an undeveloped piece of property will be stripped of its landscape to build multiple family units. If you support this rezoning, you are essentially approving the detention pond to be built 10 feet from our backyards. And with that comes the bugs, the mosquitoes, the snakes, the smell, drowning risk, and disturbing the existing natural ecosystem. The applicant spoke last week about doubling the required setback. But if the asphalt turnaround and the detention pond are built to the west part of the property, then doubling the setback doesn't really matter at all because the west part of the property will be cleared. The latest applicant proposal does have less density with 32 units. However, the water runoff and potential water issues remain the same as with high-density rezoning because projected asphalt turnaround on the west part of the property will be there. And I just want to ask, does anyone have a detention pond that was built 10 feet from their own property? Please deny the rezoning request for many reasons, specifically because of the detention pond and water issues that will come with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy Anderson and Thomas Buonadono.
Peggy Anderson, 4504 Seneca Drive. I'm a 32-year resident at that address, and I'm here to oppose ordinance 2025-03 seeking to rezone the subject parcel from RAA to RD. I'm not here to repeat the concerns and the data we've presented at all the previous meetings and in tonight's packet. I trust that members have read those materials. During Planning Commission hearings, I have heard repeated statements about drainage, traffic, detention ponds, and buffers being concerns for site plan review, not for rezoning concerns. I have heard similar comments during this board's discussion. In good faith, I expect the board members to question your own township goals for this parcel. Why this density? Why these size apartments? Why this high projected rental cost? You approved the nearby Grand Reserve development with 120 units at even higher rental costs. So what type of multifamily housing did you envision for this small parcel when you approved the 2023 future land use map? The landowner for this rezoning request purchased the property zoned as RAA. The 2024 and now 2025 requests for RC and RD are based on the 2023 future land use map recommendation. Described on page 23 of the master plan, the northern portion of this parcel is one of 3 changes. Quote, each is consistent with the use of the property currently or the surrounding properties, end quote. Currently, this is vacant land and a driveway. So, surrounding properties, do you mean one side? The change was to multifamily residential, and this would also include RDD, which would be a better transition if you're not going to build single-family homes for the surrounding 3 sides. When the next master plan is developed, please consider changing your first stated goal, which is quoted as preserve the character of existing single-family residential neighborhoods. I also suggest you alter another goal on the same page. Work toward increasing the affordability of housing for both new and existing residents, end quote. I believed these goals, and now I don't. The proposed apartments are larger than the square feet of my home. The proposed rent is twice the monthly mortgage on my Okemos-sized home. This rezoning request does not honor either of those stated township goals, and I yearn to hear a discussion from this board about why this requested density for these very expensive rental units meets your township goals of affordability and neighborhood preservation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas Buonadono and Jeanette Feintuck.
Jesus.
Thank you for listening to our comments today. We do appreciate it as residents. My name is Thomas Bonadono. I've been a taxpayer and resident for Okemos for over 23 years. I strongly oppose ordinance 25-03 in rezoning this land to multifamily residential for many reasons. The first being the traffic and infrastructure strain. Dobie Road and the surrounding intersections of Grand River, Dobie, and Hamilton are already heavily congested. This will only get worse as the 100-plus housing units at Grand Reserve open. The Dobie-Hamilton intersection does not have a right-hand turn lane. To avoid the traffic at this intersection, cars cut through Seneca and Shaker routinely. Our neighborhood does not have sidewalks, is narrow, and has no streetlights, and many curves that are blind to pedestrians coming with small children down to the ages of 2 and 3. This is a safety concern. It will escalate with more density and more people in there. That's not conjecture, that's fact. Meridian Township has seen an increase in apartment and townhome developments recently, some of which are just down the street at Grand Preserve. More townhomes shoved in a small space are not needed and do not benefit the community as a whole. More high-end rentals are not needed in the community. The board should be more concerned about creating affordable housing options for all members of the community. Rezoning this property will cause significant water and drainage issues as mentioned by others here. I don't know if these things are taken into account or once they arise, it's dumped on all the other residents to pick up that new drain because it will have to be replaced at some point. We know that without me even saying it. If it is rezoned, the township and developer will be responsible for any drainage and water issues which arise. Rezoning to multifamily residential is not compatible with the existing surrounding area. Please oppose this rezoning. Thank you for listening.
Jeanette Feintuck and then Deborah Major.
Jeanette Feintuck, 4606 Seneca Drive. I'm speaking to the council because you guys have already approved one of these nightmare developments in my backyard. And I want to say that nobody has come to rescue me from the drainage problems that have been caused by this development. Mr. Fedua has not worked with the city in an honorable way. He promised foliage trees. None in this room will live long enough for the trees that he planted to be any kind of coverage whatsoever. He showed a pretty map from Google showing a nice, lovely canopy about how protected my backyard would be from his eyesore. He clear cut all of those trees, all of them. Some of my neighbors have talked about, a drainage pond coming in. Global warming is a thing. It's not going away. It's not getting better. West Nile is now endemic to Michigan. Equine encephalitis, also endemic to Michigan. The last thing that we need is a literal cesspool backing up on single-family homes with small children. This is just unacceptable in a way that we need to plan our community. The roads, Seneca Drive is almost gravel. It's so ill taken care of. And yet you guys want to add several hundred trips per day in a high density housing development when the community has spoken. We've spoken 2019, 2024, today, going on in the future. Nobody wants to widen Dobie Road, but how are you going to pay for that if you can't take care of the roads that you already have? This development doesn't belong. It doesn't fit with either Seneca Drive, Shaker Heights, Forest Hills. It just doesn't belong, and we don't need high-density creep coming into our single-family homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Major, and then Jerry Fedua.
Hi, my name is Deborah Major, and I reside at 4570 Seneca Drive. I've lived in my house adjacent to the Fedua property in question for 25 years. I oppose the rezoning of the Fedua property from RAA, one family low density, to RD multifamily residential. The decision you make tonight about rezoning this property has absolutely nothing to do with the builder, local or family owned or not. Nor does it have anything to do with someone's desire to make money or complete an infill project. The decision you make tonight has everything to do with what is right for this parcel of land. You must get this right and be 100% sure that this is right for our community and this particular area, as there are no do-overs. We, as the taxpaying residents, will be the ones who will have to deal with the fallout from a poor decision on your part, including the traffic congestion and the drainage issues, all of it. It is unsettling that you are making such a decision tonight on a property that most of you have not set foot on. I've heard from some of you that you know this property because you looked at houses in my neighborhood many years ago, or that you drive by. That really doesn't count. To know this property is to live adjacent to it. The sharp drop-off at the west end of the property is at least 50 feet below Dobie Road, where flooding issues are already a problem. See the pictures from Brad and Esther Shaw. The location of the necessary retention pond, as well as the overflow being pumped to Dobie Road, as Mr. Fedowa recommended at the last township meeting, is going to be a civil engineering nightmare. And where will the retention pond be located? Not in the 50 feet standoff, as that is where the new church driveway is supposed to be, making an additional driveway from what we currently have on Dobie Road. This land has not changed in the last 6 years since we started talking about it, and this governing body unanimously voted no on rezoning in 2019. It was not appropriate for multifamily housing then, and it is not appropriate now. A questionable add in 2023 to the master plan made a great sale for a motivated church seller, but it does not make this land feasible for this proposed development. You have to get this right for the existing neighborhoods to the east and the west. You have to vote no to this rezoning so that single-family homes can be built as was originally intended. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Fedowa, and then Jan Fedowa.
Good evening, board members. You probably heard almost everything there is to hear about this project, dealing with the water issues that are not really issues once we're done engineering the parcel to make sure that actually every single bit of the water that's on that site gets drained to the storm system that Ingham County maintains. And I had prepared remarks, but I think it's just better that I just speak my mind. I think that you've seen the Chicago pizza place that's vacant. You've seen the Outback Steakhouse that's vacant. We've seen Maru that's left the area. There's a lot of businesses that have left, and you go onto the west side and it's flourishing. Those businesses are it's very stable. And here in this township, we have a hard time getting things approved. And I say that we want to look at the big picture. The big picture is that this 4-acre parcel, it really is an infill project. There is multifamily immediately to the north and across the street to the north or to the east. And the adjustment that is made, this backs up to 4 houses on Seneca, 4 houses. And with our screening that we would work with the township on to provide screening, and our distances of 100 feet away, I understand that folks are looking at a nice wooded parcel, and that's what they want. And they've come up with reasons that do not hold water. The reasons, the drainage issue is resolved. The traffic issue, you heard from the traffic person, is resolved. We did bring our engineer tonight to talk about this so they can better speak to exactly how the drainage is dealt with. So I would just ask that if this property is not approved, it's going to sit vacant again. The gal that was here last time we were here, economic development person, said that we need 1,500 units in Meridian Township. This is 32 units. This helps. This helps push that forward. And it's walkable. There's a bus stop in front. The urban pathway is immediately in front here. What happens with infill projects, there are people that are behind and around it. And that's what happens when you have infill projects. You have people that get a little upset, but once it's all done and they see it, they'll be fine. So I would appreciate you approving this development. Thank you.
Jan Fedowa, and then Michael McIntosh is on deck.
Hello, thank you. You have a thankless job, so thank you. My name is Jan Fedowa. I'm 6099 East Lake Drive, and I'm speaking for approval on the multi-unit on Dobie Road. We've built 6 multifamily communities. We have built subdivisions, and we have built 300 houses. We understand water and the importance of containing it on your own property. Not a drop of water from any of our projects has ever been directed to adjoining properties. There are rules and ordinance that require water to be retained on your own property. The drain commissioner, the township staff, the site inspectors are all focused on making sure that water does not drain to adjoining properties. So the neighbors can pretend there's an issue and you can try to hang your hat on it, but the drain commissioner knows, the staff knows, we know that that is not an issue because you cannot drain water to adjoining properties. The tipping point. Let's talk about the tipping point. Businesses have to make money in order to stay in business. That's how it works. So if the requirements to build on the township limit the ability of the business to make money, then you're setting the business up to fail. I think that's pretty evident in downtown Okemos and playing out in Meridian, in Hazlet. The township cannot only take into consideration the 3 or 4 adjoining neighbors. Our business is also part of this community where we have been providing quality homes and apartments for over 40 years. Let's talk about quality. Our townhomes are energy efficient. They have the latest in water and electricity, insulation. They are not mass-produced, paper-thin walled apartments that have been and are being built in Meridian Township. Where you can join the conversation of your neighbors from your unit. Adding hundreds of children to the schools who stay only a year because their parents move out of these apartments does nothing for the community. Our renters stay for years. They ended up buying in the community and becoming part of it, and stabilizing the schools and frequenting the businesses in the Meridian Township and making the township better. I ask you to approve the rezoning of this property as it will benefit Meridian Township.
Thank you. Michael McIntosh, and then Rachel Fedowa.
Good evening, board members. My name is Michael McIntosh, and I reside at 4562 Seneca Drive, and I purchased my home 2 years ago. I'm here to express my strong opposition to rezoning ordinance 2025-03. Per Jerry Fedowa just now, though this project backs up to actually 6 homes, not 4, this rezoning would affect the entire surrounding area. When I served the United States Marine Corps Infantry, I learned the importance of leadership and responsibility, making the decisions that consider the greater good and long-term impact. That is why I'm here tonight. Good leadership means carefully weighing how decisions affect the people they serve, ensuring that changes truly benefit the community rather than creating long-term problems. This proposal seeks to shoehorn 32 townhomes onto just over 4 acres in an area already saturated with traffic. The Dobie Road and Hamilton intersection is one of the most congested in the township, and adding more housing will only make it worse. I understand that traffic studies consider the current zoning of RAA, but this is a vacant lot. There are currently no homes built there. That means in realistic terms, the traffic far exceeds what the study will suggest. We are not comparing this to what traffic would be if single-family homes were built. We are comparing it to zero traffic today. This means every single car generated by this development is additional traffic stress on an already overburdened intersection and into and through my neighborhood. Beyond traffic concerns, this location already struggles with stormwater runoff and flooding. More impervious surfaces will put additional strain on stormwater systems, increasing the risk of property damage to nearby homeowners. The reality is that Meridian Township has already approved multiple high-density housing projects, yet this proposal seeks to force even more townhomes into a space that can simply not support them. We do not need to cram more high-density housing into an already struggling area. This rezoning also sets a dangerous precedent. If this small parcel can be rezoned, despite overwhelming community opposition, what is stopping future rezoning efforts that further erode the character of our neighborhoods, which is a stated goal in our 2023 future land use map? The community has made it clear that this rezoning is not wanted. More than 100 residents have signed petitions opposing this development, and many of us have shown up here tonight because we are deeply concerned about the fact and impact this will have on our roads, infrastructure, and quality of life. This is not just a handful of people, it is a large group of residents who live here, drive these roads daily, and deal with these challenges firsthand. We are asking you to listen to the people who will be most affected by this decision. I ask the board to prioritize the well-being of existing residents and deny this rezoning request. We are not against development on this parcel, we are against this development. We have to consider the long-term impact on traffic, infrastructure, quality of life, not just whether if we can fit more townhomes into a space. There are multiple reasons that this project has been denied in the past multiple times. Some projects simply do not belong in certain locations, and this is one of them. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Rachel Fedewa, and then David Fedewa.
Good evening, board members. My name is Rachel Fedewa, and I reside currently at 6412 East Lake Drive. But before that, I was a renter for 9 years in Meridian Township. That was before I married one of the Fedewas. So I didn't even know that. And, you know, I wish Jerry had an open unit when I first moved here because in those 9 years, I had lived in multiple complexes, which I could name them off for you, but I'm sure you probably already know them. The buildings had problems because of their age. At that time, I was learning about the community and did not know if I wanted to spend the rest of my life here. Now I know that I do. When I was renting, it was difficult to find quality and well-maintained places to live. The Meridian Township community could benefit greatly by having more updated and larger townhomes available, especially to young people and growing families like my own. I am for the approval on this rezoning project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David Fedewa, and then Brad Shaw.
Thank you, board members. My name is David Fedewa. I live at 278 Hazlitt Road, Hazlitt, Michigan. I'm in favor of the rezoning application on Dobie Road. Throughout the master plan document, Meridian Township highlights the infill projects over extending the service boundary. We as a community are doing this as a way to balance the growth with environmental preservation. Infill projects by nature have things built around them. There's a reason why Meridian Township Board and Planning want infill projects. It's because they balance the growth of the community without needing to extend that service boundary. Stated by the Meridian Township Director of Economic Development, Amber Clark, just 2 weeks ago, the township needs 1,500 new units built. The second thing I want to talk about was Newton Point is one example of many within Meridian Township of multifamily abutting residential. It is a new apartment complex at the crossroads of Newton and Saginaw. It's the very large white building. The setbacks here show us what's possible. There are multifamily buildings in this complex that have 30-foot setbacks to residential. On the Dobie Road rezoning that we're asking for tonight is a 100-foot setback. The Newton Point has a 50-foot tall building that's 66 feet from the property line to a residential home. We're asking for 2-story buildings. All these setbacks and heights of the buildings were unanimously approved by this board, and we ask you to unanimously approve this Dobie Road infill project. The discussion of traffic has come up multiple times on this project. As part of our application, it is required that we conduct a traffic assessment. If we're not going to follow what the experts have to say, then why is it a requirement? I feel like the results of the assessment were disregarded because they did not fit what people wanted them to be. Third thing, Seneca neighbors have direct access to an amazing 56-acre land preserve surrounding their neighborhood. After removing setbacks and easements, we are just looking to build on 2.8 acres of our own property and creating a large separation from our neighbors in the rear. Lastly, this is an amazing infill project that has been shaped by the community, unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. It's on the future land use map as multifamily parcel. It's within the urban service boundary and helps our community get to the goal of 1,500 new units. I ask you to unanimously approve this for our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Brad Shaw, and then Brett Stockhill.
I'm Brad Shaw from 4504 Dobie Road. You have my written statement. I will limit my remarks to the rezoning application before the board. It contains 4 false statements, namely alignment to the master plan, acreage of the land available to a residential development, description of the parcel, and available infrastructure for high-density residential development. Number 1, the applicant states that the requested rezoning aligns to the township master plan. This is known to be false and well documented as false. I am guessing that the township does not have policies for who is allowed to have an intent and has no way to manage an intent. No clever wordplay from the township in a resolution can change the fact that the requested rezoning does not align with the township master plan and the future land use map. Number 2, the actual acreage available to the residential project should be used, something less than 4.28 acres, after excluding the future church driveway. Number 3, in the description of the parcel, there is no mention of the north driveway to the church and the mature trees that grace that driveway. Granted, a request to rezone a church driveway as residential would look absurd in writing, but here we are again, rezoning a future church driveway as high-density residential. Granted, and the applicant has nothing to offer regarding the legacy trees on both sides of the current driveway. Number 4, and most important, the applicant states that the site has direct access to infrastructure for high-density residential development. This is known to be false and well documented to be false. It is known to the Drain Commission and the township's engineering department that Dobie Road, from Arrow Tree Apartments to Forest Hill Drive, lacks working ditches and conduits that should run to the Sprouse Drain and Daniels Drain extension. Dobie Road is currently rural by the standards of Ingham County Road Department, which is not consistent with high-density housing. Moreover, Dobie Road is a substandard rural road. As such, the applicant does not have direct access to the infrastructure necessary for high-density residential development. Necessary work by the Ingham County Road Department and the Drain Commission will be extensive, and they don't have the money. Per the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, addressing flood prevention and drainage must be part of amending a master plan. The township cannot just punt to Ingham County at some later point. Moreover, a site plan for one slice of this pre-existing problem gets us nowhere. The viable plan of drainage, and I've been with the Planning Commission for like 3 years on this, or on the Drain Commission for 3 years. A site plan for one slice of this pre-existing problem gets us nowhere. A viable plan for drainage will be required. Attention to the remaining Lutheran property, the residential property on Dobie Road, and the township's pathway.
Thank you very much.
I'm a no, by the way.
Brett Stockhill, and then Elizabeth Chapman. Anyone else who wishes to turn in a green card, now would be the time.
Brett Stockhill, 3821 Lansing, 3821 Stone Lane, Lansing, sorry. I'm just here as a civil engineer to provide some clarification to some misconceptions and misinformation on stormwater drainage. To start with, as was previously said, no stormwater can run off onto the neighboring property. It'll have to be running through a detention pond that is strictly controlled by the Ingham County Drain Commissioner in their rules and regulations. It will have to be discharged to a county drain. It cannot be discharged to a road ditch such as Dobie Road. There are 2 exits of drainage. There's a Daniels Drain at Chief Okemos Road. There's also a catch basin extension on Oneida Road at the southwest corner of the property. Additionally, the rate of release out of a detention pond by the Ingham County rules is less than what runs off a property currently even in its undeveloped state. So it will be severely restricted, and that restricted amount will go directly to a county drain in some way or fashion. It will not go onto a neighboring property. And then any excessive water that runs off now will also be captured in that drain, so it'll actually make it better in those backyards. So it is a real misinformation on that from an engineering standpoint. Within the site, all that water would be captured. It would be captured and then sent to a detention pond. As I said, the Ingham County has a 100-year detention policy. They also have some water quality things in place to release sediment or decrease sediments and contaminations. And they also have additional, what we call freeboard, for additional overflow in case there's something or a 500-year rain or some catastrophic, so it will take all that water. So there's just a lot of misunderstanding as to what is going on. I think I heard a concrete detention pond. It is not concrete. It's all turf. I guess that's all I got to say at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth Chapman, and that does it for the green cards.
I normally don't speak publicly, and I apologize if I start crying because I have anxiety, profound grief, depression, and ADD. But I moved here when I was 2 with my father and mom, Norval Burgett, who lives at 4520 Seneca Drive, right next to Dave and Christy. And one of the reasons we were the second owners of the house, it had only been there a year or 2 when we bought it. And one of the main reasons we bought it is because we were told nothing was going to be built in the back. And through the years when I was little, they took that land and they made plots to farm, and we rented out different plots, and we were able to farm vegetables, and I learned all about potatoes and carrots and all that. And it's just been wonderful living there. So when my late husband and I decided to buy a house, one came up at 4486 Calgary Boulevard in Okemos, which is right around the corner from my 92-year-old dad. And so he would be here if he wasn't so upset about this and had enough energy. So now I'm his caretaker. But this whole thing is really upsetting to him and me. And when you make comments like Outback Steakhouse left, well, I talked to the general manager and they left because the rent kept going up. And I don't see how we need to have any more people and traffic because it's going to cause my anxiety to go up. Because part of the reason we moved there is because it was a safe place for me, and that's where I grew up. And I vote to oppose ordinance 2025-03. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed at 7:19 p.m. Next on our agenda is item 6, the Township Manager Report. Manager Dempsey.
Yes, good evening, board members. Just one update this evening.
So everyone's been notified that we have an emergency sewer repair in East Lake Drive. Had the opportunity to go out on site on Monday morning with the deputy township manager, and we I got a better understanding of what they're up against. There are some challenges out there with the utility pole and proximity and some other things that constrain the site, but we're probably looking at a 6 to 9 week closure there. So just want to remind the residents of that live nearby, and to make accommodations for going elsewhere, especially those who like to cycle or run around the lake on East Lake Drive. To just please stay away from the construction area. There is a lot of heavy equipment out there, and we want to keep people safe. So just a reminder for folks to plan accordingly, and we'll continue to update the public online and in social media as we get those updates. Thank you.
Board members, any questions on the report? Seeing none, we move on. Item 7 is board member reports of activities and announcements. Any board members with reports of activities and announcements this evening? Trustee Sunland.
Yeah, I attended the March 6th meeting of the Economic Development Corporation. It was kind of a quick meeting. We authorized some signatures and some reports. We talked a little bit about the facade improvement program. It's a $25,000 grant to businesses to improve their exteriors, existing exteriors. So anyway, it was a brief meeting, and but it was very productive. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Other board members? Trustee Wilson.
I just wanted to remind everyone that the CRC meeting that I missed last week is running a program called the Baby Bottle Boomerang. Out in the hallway, you'll find baby bottles, and they are raising money by asking people to put a check in or change or, a $100 bill. And all that money will go to support Meridian Cares, which assists our low-income residents. And I also wanted to tell you, I had the opportunity on Saturday to attend the Southern Indian Telugu celebration of that community. In Meridian Township, specifically in Okemos, we have over 800 families that are from Southern India originally. And they had a celebration for their kids who attend school that's run by volunteers over at 242 Church. And they learn the Telugu native language. So all 50 kids got up and sang something or recited something in the original language. It was a wonderful cultural experience. So I advise everybody to take opportunities like that.
Thank you very much. Clerk Demas.
Last week, I attended a Clerks Institute that was held by the Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks. This is a part of a 3-year institute program, and that's in place to help us meet the requirements to be IIMC and MIPMC certified. I was able to receive a lot of helpful training, like all about meeting procedures, preparing for elections, FOIA, and so much more. So when I complete the full program, I'll be certified.
Terrific. Trustee Wentz.
Yeah, always the day after these meetings, so it's been a couple weeks, but the Meridian Environmental Commission met on the 5th of March. Productive meeting, got to meet Jack Hughes, Meridian Township staff member, who will be joining us for those conversations. Really, I would like to say first and foremost that Meridian residents are very lucky to have the commission that we have. There's a lot of intelligence and experience on that commission, so there's been a lot of learning on my part from folks who've been doing this for a long time, including Bill McConnell, of course, who was recognized for his volunteerism. With that said, any township residents who are interested in learning more about Meridian and the environment, we can work on getting a presentation schedule up. We are talking about having food rescue and cleaning being presented to the group through our fantastic farmers markets, Ingham County Drain Office to speak about the drains in Meridian. And hopefully hear from green grant recipients, which is where I'll leave it. The green grants are a great way for individual groups who might be wanting to work on some small projects in Meridian to get fundings from the local community. So, if it's a HOA that wants to, plant some native habitat or fix an issue to make it more environmentally friendly, I would encourage you to look out for those green grants, as they will be, available soon. And it's, a few $1,000s towards a project can go a long way for if everyone gets involved. So, great stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Other board members? Okay. My report will be relatively brief. Last Tuesday at this time in this room was the final meeting of the Senior and Community Center Task Force. I say final because at the conclusion of the meeting, the task force did take action to recommend a site, to recommend a staffing plan, to recommend a program for a senior center and a program for a senior and community center, and show preference to one of the two conceptual diagrams that were presented to the task force at that meeting. It was a very productive meeting. And we should look forward to that being on our agenda starting next month, so that we can discuss what the next steps for that or those projects are. So that concludes my report. Next up this evening on our agenda is item 8, approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by trustee Wilson. Do we have a second?
Support.
Seconded by trustee Lentz. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Next on our agenda is item 9, the consent agenda. On our consent agenda, we have a number of items this evening, including communications with the township. I will point out, since there are a number of folks here in the room who may have also sent us emails, we do consolidate these emails prior to the publication of the packet, which comes toward the end of the week. If you sent us something over the weekend or early this week, it will be reflected in our next packet 2 weeks from now. So we include the communications that made it prior to the cutoff, the minutes from our March 4th township meeting, township board meeting, the bills, a liquor license application for Celebrate Meridian, which is coming up in June, three agreements to approve an encouragement on the county drain easement and a permit to cross the county drain easement, a license agreement to encroach in county drain easements, and drainage system facilities maintenance agreements and stormwater management easements from Deputy Manager Opsimer, as well as a memo to dispose of surplus equipment. Do you have a motion for the consent agenda? Treasurer DeShane.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Do you have a second?
Support.
Supported by trustee Trezise. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Clerk Demas will please call the roll.
Trustee Sunland,
Yes.
Clerk Demas, yes. Trustee Lentz,
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Trustee Trezise,
Yes.
Trustee Wilson,
Yes.
Supervisor Hendrickson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is item 10, questions for the attorney. We have none. Item 11, hearings. We have none. Before we get to item 12A, we have been here for about 90 minutes. We'll take a 5-minute recess without objection. We stand at recess for 5 minutes.
I went to a fundraiser for her. Alyssa was there and Debbie Dingle when we went to high school. She was first year of the.
Yeah.
She is something else. She's fabulous. 40 years old.
She's gonna be the next senator.
Did you think so?
I'm not saying I think, I'm saying
I think it's possible.
that's who they want.
I think it's possible.
All right, we'll give Clerk Demas another moment or two here. We'll call ourselves back to order at 7:34 p.m. Next on our agenda is item 12A, ordinance 2025-03, rezone vacant W Road, parcel ID number 33020222454003 from RAA one-family low-density residential to RD multiple-family residential up to 8 units per acre, subject to a conditional zoning agreement. This is for introduction. This evening, we have Director of Community Planning and Development, Tim Schmidt, here to tell us a little bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Following up on our last meeting where we introduced this and had initial discussion, just as a reminder to everyone, currently property is zoned RAA, one-family low-density residential. It's consistent with the use of the property previously as a part of the church. This property was partitioned off and sold to the developer. And the request in front of this evening is to rezone to RD multifamily residential up to 8 units per acre, subject to a conditional rezoning agreement. That conditional rezoning agreement has two components. It would increase the rear yard building setback on the western boundary from the required 40 feet to 100 feet, and it would restrict the allowable type of units to townhomes, maximizing at 4 total buildings with 8 units per building. We've talked about the history of this, and I'm happy to discuss that further, but I just want to touch on 2 points that came up at the last meeting, along with one additional item. First off, what would the process be if the board wanted to modify the request? And to be, we talked about this a little bit, and I followed up with the attorneys. This is a conditional rezoning request. Under the way the state law is written on this item, you have no ability to modify it. It is they offer, we accept or deny. The appropriate path, if the board would like to do an alternative here, would be to deny this request and then formally introduce a alternative that would be referred to the Planning Commission. Public hearings would be held in accordance with the normal course of action, and then that matter would then come back to the board for a final decision. So happy to discuss that further if you'd like, but the modifying the request is not an option to the board here. Secondly, though, the one thing that you can do explicitly under the state law is with respect to how long does the conditional rezoning stay in place. And I believe I discussed this briefly at the last meeting, but can confirm that the board does have the ability to impose that condition on the project. Typically, in my professional history, this has been consistent with your expiration of other discretionary approvals in your ordinance. And so in our case, that is a special land use, and that is 2 years. So what we would recommend, if the board wishes to include, that the staff would recommend a 2-year period where this is in place. If construction has not started within a 2-year period, we would then begin the process to rezone this back to its current designation. That would be staff's recommendation, and we'd be happy to discuss that further. I would also just lastly like to point out, I know that we've shared this with the public already. We did receive a protest petition on this, and after, at our direction, asked the township attorney to review this as the state law clearly does not allow this process for townships. It was discussed actually in the last legislature, but ultimately was not adopted. And so protest petition is in your packet this evening for information, obviously, but the provisions of Section 403 do not apply to this request. At the direction of the Township Board, at the last meeting, we have provided you with 2 resolutions in your packet, one to approve ordinance 25-03 for introduction and one to deny ordinance 25-03. Consistent with any request I bring forward to you, I would encourage you to put your reasons for approval or denial on the record as you review the matter. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you might have them.
Thank you very much, Director Schmidt. We certainly appreciate that. And obviously, we've heard a lot from members of the public, both in writing and here at the meeting this evening about that. So we bring this up for action this evening for introduction. Board members, we'll turn it over to you. Trustee Wilson.
I'm going to make the motion with the optional addition attached to it. Move to adopt the resolution approving for introduction ordinance 2025-03, an ordinance to rezone one vacant parcel on Dobie Road, parcel ID number 33-02-022-024-454-003, from RAA one-family low-density residential to RD multiple-family residential up to 8 dwelling units per acre, subject to a conditional rezoning agreement, limiting the term of the conditional rezoning agreement to 2 years, which will require construction to begin in that time period.
Okay, it's been moved by Trustee Wilson. Do we have a second?
I'll support.
Supported by Trustee Trezise. Discussion on this agenda item. Treasurer DeShane.
I'm going to oppose the motion and oppose the rezoning from single family to RD. The RD rezoning has been said by many of the neighboring residents. It shoehorns 32 rather large townhouses into a very small parcel. With these 32 units, there's not likely to be enough adequate retention ponds or visitor parking, and there's no overflow really allowed for either one. The developer has promised a 100-foot barrier, but we're finding out there's no 100-foot barrier. You get the turnaround and you get the retention pond, the buffer is 10 feet from the retention pond or 50 feet from the turnaround. How are trucks going to turn around? How are Ranger trucks going to turn around? They'll be using that turnaround there. It's not going to be used just for fire trucks. It's going to be used regularly there because there's no other place to go with this very narrow parcel and large townhouses on both sides. As for the claim that the developer can't make enough money with 20 units, I would remind you that our job is not to guarantee the profitability of developers. Our job is to make the best land use decisions for our township and our neighborhoods. Whatever purchase price was agreed to by the developer wasn't our business, and whether or not 20 units is feasible or not really is not our concern. Our concern is this question: is 32 units too much for this parcel? And I strongly believe it is. 20 appears to be a fair compromise. 32 was not a compromise by the developer. He brought 64 units to this board 6 years ago, and the discussion lasted about 15 minutes, and the board told him, no, develop it in single family. It was never considered to be a viable option for this. So the idea that he's compromising it from 64 is not true. He never even came close to approval of 64 units for this parcel. So a real compromise for him would be 15 or 16 units, which is half between what the zoning is now, what he's asking for, not 32. But even 20 units is really risky for this parcel. Dobie Road and the surrounding areas, Grand River, Dobie and Hamilton are already heavily congested. That intersection with two lights there is one of the worst intersections in the township. Adding 32 housing units in those locations is only going to worsen the situation. It's going to increase delays. And Dobie Road, here the traffic engineer says it's fine. Well, anybody who drives Dobie Road today knows it's not fine today. So I don't know how adding 32 townhouses, 60 cars to that tight area is going to improve the situation, or it's going to make it sustainable. As was pointed out earlier, it's a rural road to begin with no shoulders whatsoever. It's immediate fall off. It's very dangerous for pedestrians, bicyclists. There is a sidewalk on part of the road, but not the entire road. Adding more traffic is going to add to our traffic concerns. As for the environmental concern, it's already prone to stormwater runoff, as we saw the Daniels drain. That area, that landowner doesn't perk very well. And more impervious spaces will increase the risk for flooding, put additional strains on the stormwater systems that are already struggling, reduce the green space significantly, and the natural water absorption, leading to, again, long-term environmental consequences. And this is the really risky part. It could create potential property damage risk for the neighboring homeowners in the Shaker Heights neighborhood, particularly during heavy rainfall. We all are aware climate change is real. It's not, while some may claim it's a myth, we all know it's real. And climate change is unknown, and we could have twice the annual rainfall that we expect. That blows up all the stormwater retention estimates there. And with less area to permeate this, it becomes a real issue for those neighbors to the south of this and downhill from this. This cost could be several $1,000s as it was in the Forest Hill neighborhood for the Daniels Drain. And don't forget that the several $1,000s paid by Forest Hills residents was only after the township paid for half of the Daniels Drain, because we had money left over and we didn't want to impose it all upon those residents. We don't have several $1 million to drain out the next drain assessment, which this one will likely involve. There's just many, many unknowns to this high density upzoning, and virtually all of them are negative for the surrounding neighbors. One of our expressed goals is to make housing more affordable in the township. This proposal, in fact, does the opposite. As was pointed out here, you need 150% of the median income to afford living in these apartments. This is not affordable housing. It's more unaffordable housing, such as we have with the Grand Reserve in Newton Point. This adds to the problem rather than reducing it. It takes this 4-acre lot, rather than having single-family homes there, we have high-density, upscale townhouses. There's 4 acres left to develop affordable housing in the future in the township. Not only that, it's rent-a-housing. So one developer can concentrate his money, develop this property, and charge rents to the 32 families for the next 40, 50 years, making homeownership unattainable for another group of our residents. You know, we were all a year ago out knocking door to door and talking to the fine people of this township. I'm sure we all walked Shaker Heights and asked them for our votes. And what did we say we were going to do? We were going to promote environmental sustainability. Does this project promote that? I don't think so. We're going to protect our neighborhoods. Well, the neighbors sure don't think this is going to protect them. They're scared for this. And we were going to work hard for affordable housing. Those were 3 of our main talking points. They were mine. I think many of yours too. And now we're elected. We have a tough decision, and we can either take a risky decision to put 100 residents' homes and their biggest investment at risk, or we can give the developer this upzone, this increased zoning, so he can make a lot of money off this parcel. I don't think it's worth risking these residents' homes and their quality of life by approving this zoning. I think it really goes against our core values. We ran together as a team, and these core values were important to all of us. And I think this vote is contrary to those core values. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Duchesne. Trustee Wilson.
I did not undertake this decision lightly in looking at all the options that we had. I'm a 39-year resident of Okemos, Meridian Township. In this plan, the developer has specified certain conditions, and we've added another condition to that tonight. The 100-foot setback, the 50-foot buffer to the church, the mitigation of the water, and we are not hydrologists, so we cannot assume that we know exactly about water flows and which drain will be used and so on. That's left to the Ingham County Drain Commission. And the Ingham County Drain Commission will weigh in on this parcel before it is approved, the site plan approval goes forward. So will the Road Commission. And they will look at what is happening on this property, and they will ensure that the water does not leave the property. That is part of what they do, and we rely on them for their expertise. Expecting this area to be undeveloped or single-family residences is just not realistic. When you have 14 units per acre to the north and to the east, just northeast of there, and This is stepping down the number of units from the 14 units per acre to the 8 units per acre. And it may not develop at that level because obviously there's some serious water issues that need to be addressed. So for those reasons, I brought forward this option of approving the proposal because it's logical to me. I don't think single-family homes belong there. I don't think people would want to buy single-family homes if they were located on that parcel. So I used my best judgment. I did 4 years on the Planning Commission, 7 years on the board over 2 terms, and I really gave this a careful look, and this seemed the most logical thing to group multifamily so that we preserve our residential, single-family neighborhoods, and we cluster our multifamily where it is most accommodating. So thank you for for letting me make those comments.
Other discussion? Trustee Lance.
I have some questions for Mr. Schmidt, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, sir.
I appreciate how much time we spent chatting about this a couple weeks ago. I think everyone on this board have spent, the majority of the last couple weeks thinking about this at least every day. With that, I'm curious, that we talk about a retention pond being built, as ordered by the Ingham County Drain Office. We're working under that assumption, I think is the best way to describe it. Does that requirement push the setback from the 40-foot setback that currently exists? Let me rephrase that question, I'm sorry. Does that retention pond supersede any setback requirements? Like, could it be built in that required setback, or would the setback be added on to that retention pond?
So by ordinance, the setback is for buildings only.
Okay.
Retention ponds are commonly put in the building setback. Most notably, the one I would point out is the one in front of the Chipotle, Aspen Dental, Verizon building at Grand River and Okemos Road. It's right on the property line.
Gotcha. Thank you for explaining that. We think about what we know and what we see around us, and as someone who lives next to Newton Place and through walking my dog a lot around that area, I did get to see it get built. I am happy to hear that we're not trying to make a carbon copy with 5 stories in this same parcel, but the thing that really comes to mind for me is the tight housing market in Meridian, and not just in Meridian, but nationally. An article I read from U.S. Bank indicates that there are 4 million homes available for rent in the entire country, which is, outside of last year, the lowest rate we have ever seen that they've recorded. While single-family low-density homes have been a gift to all of us who have lived in them and have enjoyed a yard, that is not the reality for many township residents. I've looked at numbers related to pricing of rent on a number of sites that aggregate rent, and based on the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission's estimate of median income in Meridian Township of being just shy of 80,000, this would be, actually 83,000, which is of course significantly higher than the region. The proposed rent, which I know is not what we're deciding here, does fit within this plan. I keep coming back to the number of the Tri-County Regional Planning saying that Meridian would need to build 1,652 units over the next 5 years, something that we on this board probably are not going to be able to accomplish, but that growth means more money for the great schools that we have here, more money for municipal government to fix these water main problems that Mr. Opsimer spent so much time explaining to us. And it means ideally, more people get to experience the great parks that we all love here. Green space is great, but when it is on private land that is available to be developed and there is a need for additional housing development, I am inclined to support the action to rezone, especially with the understanding that there are more hoops to jump through for this builder at the county level, including the drainage office and the road office, who both have, I think everyone on this board can agree, strong jurisdictional understanding of their role and very well could bring elements to this project that might make it non-viable. I really enjoy I support what Trustee Wilson included with the optional addition. I don't have an interest in this project being a plague on us for longer because of all the things that come along the way. Another question I had for Mr. Schmidt, if you don't mind, is does that 2-year window begin upon our approval, or would that be upon approval from the county drain office and the county road commission, and once they get all their ducks in a row?
So it would be upon the ordinance becoming legal.
Okay.
So there has to be should the ordinance be introduced this evening, there would still be final adoption at the next meeting, then it has to be published. Under state law, there's a certain amount of time that passes before it's legal. And so once it is legally adopted, then the 2-year period would start.
I appreciate your explanation of that. Again, this decision did not come lightly, and I appreciate every member of the public who came to speak about this, especially those who have more knowledge about these building projects than I do, but I do agree with the motion presented as of now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Cortines.
I want to highlight some of the comments that we've heard tonight and over the past couple of weeks. It's clear that people who live in this area do not want this ordinance. We've received numerous signatures protesting the zoning ordinance. We've heard our community's concerns. People are opposed to this. We heard concerns about draining, traffic, and I haven't really seen anything in the plan that addresses it. I understand that this is an introduction, but how can we guarantee that people in our community are going to be satisfied with the outcome of this ordinance? I could see the benefits if this was truly affordable housing, because trust me, as a young person living here, we definitely need more affordable housing options. But looking at this seems to be another expensive rental housing project. And it's built in a very small area. It's 8 units per acre. I would be for modifying this request, but because this was submitted as a conditional rezoning, that's not the option. So we have only 2 options here, which is to approve the rezoning as is or deny it in hopes to receive a request that's better fit to our township needs, which I would be more inclined to do.
Trustee Sunland.
Well, I would echo Angela's comments that, well, first of all, any rezoning is, hey, it's already been zoned. We're looking for something different. And I'm not sure, based on the people in the surrounding community and how strongly they feel about it. This is a small parcel. I'm not sure we're going to get a whole lot of benefit from developing this parcel. And again, to Angela's comments, it's not affordable for the average young person or the average single person, or, so I would be opposed to this. I was around when this came up in the past, and because I've been on the board for 8 years and going into my next term. But so I want to be cautious. I think that the zoning is what it is, partly for a reason. And I would be hesitant to change the zoning based on all the input and the concerns. So I'm not convinced that we should adopt this resolution. I think we need to deny it for now and see what else is possible.
Trustee Trezise.
I agree with a lot of the comments from both sides of this discussion. However, if a key issue is affordable housing, I can assure you that building fewer units on this property would not make them more affordable. There are costs involved in development, and having more available there to occupy, to involve families, makes it cheaper by the unit, if we put it that way. The reason this is zoned the way it is because it was church property, and those types of properties by default are zoned. We don't have a special zoning ordinance for churches, for schools. So as a rule, they default to the zoning that's there, whether that makes sense long-term or not. Yes, these are not cheap apartments as far as what's projected. On the other hand, there are people who need housing and are willing and able to pay that kind of rental. I don't know that this will ever be built because of the nature of the property, because of the water issues, because of a number of areas of concern. It may not be economically feasible, but it's not going to get more feasible by restricting it to single-family housing. And it's going to sit and, an individual has a right to use his property for reasonable usages in the area. And I think this is a reasonable step down from the higher density apartments to the north and to the northeast. And while maybe not my ideal of a development, we don't have final plans. We don't know what it'll actually look like. And I think the zoning is appropriate. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt.
Yes, sir.
There are two conditions in this conditional rezoning. The second one says restrict the type of, restrict the type of allowable units to townhomes, a total of 4 buildings with 8 units per building, each with their own front door and garage accessible from the outside. My question to you is, we have, this is a stricture on our zoning, right? And all of the pictures and site plans and what have you, everything that we've seen about conceptually what this might look like has been superfluous to the rezoning decision. So my question to you is, as it goes through site plan review, if they discover that they can only fit 3 buildings onto this parcel, are they able to build it under the covenants of this conditional rezoning? It seems like they've boxed themselves into a corner where they can only develop on this parcel if it's 4 buildings, 8 units.
So,
I mean, I would expect up to would be a much more permissive clause for them, and I don't see that in here.
I'm pulling up the application real quick just to make sure that I didn't miscopy it, but I'm fairly certain I copied it word for word. I tend to agree that I would have written it with up to. But historically, these types of agreements are limiting sort of the maximum development on a site. That's why they're offered, because you're reducing the potential negative externalities to the extent that you believe you can, while still making the application work. I would probably end up erring on the side of, it's not even a sentence. you know, I see exactly what you're saying, if put on the spot right now, I would defer to saying that that is a maximum development on the site, as opposed to an exact development on the site.
Okay.
Because we're not getting into, as you mentioned, the conceptual layout and the conceptual design and things like that. They're superfluous to this discussion. So I think what you're looking at here is sort of the maximum that they could build on the site. And that's why the condition's offered, right? If you look at the intent of the condition, the development, in theory, would allow a higher number of units on the property there, instead of restricting that down to 32. Certainly, if that does become an issue, we are going to have a long, hard conversation with our attorneys to confirm that. But I think the intent is to limit the development to no more than 32 units per acre.
Okay, thank you. So I wasn't on the board the first time this came around. I was, however, on the planning commission when it did. And at that time, I went back because we see a lot of these rezonings. And I was the one that made the motion to deny the original proposal that came before the planning commission, or at least recommend denial to the board. And the reason was that this was not in the master plan, right? At the time, the future land use map indicated that this was institutional land use. And obviously that has changed. And you may not love the notice requirements of the master plan, and you may not love that some folks got involved in the master plan's update and some didn't. But the fact of the matter is that it did. It was updated. And this now is multifamily housing in the future land use map from institutional. As my colleagues have pointed out, we're not water experts. However, the drain commissioner is. And I certainly understand the concern of residents about water. We've got a very wet township, and we've got water everywhere. And the best thing you can say about the drain commissioner is that he is very strict when it comes to ensuring that water is taken care of in both projects like this and throughout the county. He does not err on the side of being pro-development and water everywhere. He errs on the side of making sure that your water is taken care of, as I'm sure any developer who works in Meridian Township and throughout the rest of the county will tell you. In terms of the traffic, the traffic studies show what they show. They include what they include, and they don't include what they don't include. We have heard from the residents about what they do not include. We've heard from the developer about what they do include. And at a certain point, you have to review the scientific analysis. You have to add in the externalities that you are aware of and take that information and make your best assessment with it. That's what we can do with the information that's provided. I believe that this is a good rezoning overall. And nobody likes rezonings, right? Every time we have a rezoning coming up in front of the board or the planning commission, when I was on the planning commission, there would be a number of folks who were concerned, who were nervous, and who were worried about what the future might look like. And I'd say that in each case that I've been a part of, at least, it's always turned out better than people were imagining that it might. And I think that this project will be no different. This is a step down in zoning from a density perspective from the property to the north, from the RC zoning that they have there to the proposed RD. And I believe that this is in line with our goal to increase the housing stock And I agree with Trustee Trezis's assessment that even if we were to rezone this to a lesser density with lesser units, the impact on the affordability of the resulting housing would actually be the opposite of what we would hope for if our goal is to bring affordable housing into the township. And so I'll be supportive of this introduction this evening. And yeah, Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. Regarding the master plan change, it is a shame, terrible shame that we could change this and not inform the residents right around it. And certainly we should change that with the next master plan so we don't do this again. But it wasn't an organic change that came from the planning commission. It was a change that was lobbied for by the developer and the property seller. And if they'd really done their due diligence, they would have invited in the neighboring properties to see what they thought of it. Instead, they were successful in lobbying to be changed, but there has to be a line where multifamily ends on Dobie Road, because the rest of Dobie Road is rural residential all the way to Jolly Road. And so there's no more reason to extend it another parcel. Where it ends now makes more sense. Across the street from this parcel are rural residential lots. But more to the point about this decision, we're lucky to have a split vote on this. And I think whenever this board speaks in an important decision with a split vote, it's not good. In the past, much of the past 8 years, we were able to reach consensus. We were able to find compromise, and the board could differ but then come together. That happened on Robbins Way, where the developer wanted 8 units, and we came to an agreement to do only 5. It happened up at the Walnut Hills Country Club, where the developer wanted 312 units, and the new owner came in at 133. Of course, it didn't happen because someone bought that and put a big home on it. But in both cases, we came together and we found a middle ground that we could all move forward with. I think we can do this with this property. If we turn this down tonight and entertain a proposal for RDD at 20 units, it shows these residents that we're listening to them. It shows that we're concerned about their concerns. And this idea that, well, maybe the drain commissioner will scale us down, or maybe it won't ever get built because it's not feasible. Really, it's our job to say, we think this is too much, and not let the drain commissioner come in and do the heavy lifting here. We are the legislative body here, and we've heard concerns about how tight this is. So let's be proactive. Let's say no to 32 units and entertain a proposal for 20. We could probably get 5 or 6 votes, or maybe 7 votes for RDD. And rather than having a 4-3 vote here, it's not a good way for this board to move forward, because we're going to be seeing this again and again over the next few years if it comes forward, and we're going to be still stuck with this 4-3 split. I, too, agree that single-family development is probably not going to happen here. And we can do multifamily, but we can do multifamily in a more moderate way. And 4 units rather than 8 units per acre is a much more reasonable number. Gives lots more space for the retention spots, retention ponds, a true setback for the turnaround, and more permeable land is preserved rather than it all being taken out here. So I think there's a middle way here, and I encourage the board to vote no on this and let this come back with an RDD, a proposal we can all 7 vote for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. The motion before the board this evening is to adopt a resolution approving for introduction ordinance 2025-03 to rezone the parcel on Dobie Road from RAA to RD, multiple family residential, up to 8 dwelling units per acre, with the optional limitation on the conditional rezoning agreement to 2 years, which requires construction in that time period. Clerk Demas, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
Trustee Lentz?
Yes.
Clerk Demas? No. Treasurer DeShane?
No.
Trustee Sunland?
No.
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. So we'll see you back in 2 weeks for adoption, yes?
There will be an additional resolution for adoption in 2 weeks, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda is item 12B, the Earned Sick Time Act compliance. We have Manager Dempsey here to talk to us about that.
Yes, good evening. So in a few moments here, we're going to be talking about the personnel policy But one of the items that we wanted to advance sooner was the Earned Sick Time Act compliance, so our sick time policy. So what we've done is sort of pulled that out from the policy and have it here tonight for you to consider adopting. The changes at the state went into effect on February 21st. The state notified all employers that you effectively have sort of 30 days to get your ducks in a row to be in compliance. We've already started to monitor this and track hours and make sure that we're in compliance. But we do want to adopt the policy to be consistent with the state act. There is one caveat here, and I apologize for this, but when we extracted out from the draft personnel policy to get a clean version of this, it did not remove the striked sentences in this section. But if you go to the personnel policy further in the agenda, which would be page 236 if you're in the 327-page version. If you're in the updated version with 300, with the larger pages, it's page 289. So either page 236 or 289. What I want you to do is adopt that version of it as edited. Because again, there's just some strike changes that for whatever reason did not get removed from the clean version. So I apologize for that. But again, essentially the added language is the consistency with the Earned Sick Time Act, or ESTA, as it's referred to in short form.
Thank you very much. Board members, this does require a suspension of our rules since this is the first time we're considering this. Can we get that out of the way before we get into the discussion, please? Trustee Wilson.
Move to suspend our rules to take up this motion.
Support. Supported by Treasurer DeShane. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we get into the actual discussion of the ESTA, sick leave policy as presented. Any discussion at this time?
Do we need to take up the motion?
We do need a motion to consider, I suppose, yes. Trustee Wilson.
Move to approve the sick leave policy as presented.
Second.
Supported by Clerk Demas. Any discussion at this time? Trustee Wilson.
It's just compliance with the law, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's compliance with the law and consistency with where we're at. It does not prohibit us from modifying it as we go through the other personnel, but we just want to be on the clock. Our legal counsel advised us to have this in place sooner than later, again, to meet that 30-day window.
Okay. Do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, so this is, I think, as minimal changes as we could make in compliance with the Earned Sick Time Act. So my understanding is there's not currently any issues with how sick time works within the personnel policy, which only applies to non-union staff, I should say. So this does not impact those under a collective bargaining agreement. They'll have to be ESTA compliant the next time that their contract is negotiated. So the changes here are simply to get in compliance without doing additional kind of damage to the policy.
Trustee Trezise.
Our current sick leave policy for these individuals, my guess is exceeds the minimum requirements of ESTA. So we're incorporating essentially the expanded rationale for utilizing sick time more than adjusting the time accrued.
That's correct. I think with the only exception being the policy currently only applies to regular full-time and part-time. Right. The ESTA applies to all employees with very limited exceptions, but otherwise, you're right. It is not an adjustment of the number of hours. It's just a refinement.
I've spent the past 2 weeks going through ESTA for the Okemos schools. So.
It's a blast.
Yeah, it is. It's exciting reading.
It really is.
Trustee Lentz.
My understanding, based on the straightforward nature of this, is that upon adoption, we'll be within compliance with the law, and any future changes don't need to, outside of obviously continuing to follow the law as adopted by the Michigan legislature, no accommodations need to be made when updating this policy if we as a township decide we want to, vastly expand or paid sick time or something along those lines. Is that correct? Would we need to bring you back in outside of just reviewing the policy, or? once we're in compliance, we're good.
Yeah, likely you would not, as long as you would not be diminishing any of the things required by the Earned Sick Time Act. But if it were merely an expansion, there would be no issue.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions or discussion? How does the ESTA handle appointed or, well, let's start with appointed officials. And then, we bring on dozens of folks, the clerk does, for elections in a given year. Are those folks also covered by this?
Yeah, so appointed officials, I think I'll distinguish between a couple different groups. Appointed boards and commissions are very clearly excluded. There's really no argument that those would be employees of the township. Other appointed folks who, I guess, look a little bit more like employees, so for instance, your deputy clerk, your deputy treasurer, if they have employment duties, essentially, if they do more than simply stand in the shoes of an absent elected official, they would be counted as employees. For election workers in particular, there is no carve out for them, even though they work, minimal hours for kind of short periods of time. What the ESTA permits, though, is a 120-day waiting period for the use of sick leave, which would often cover your entire election season. And then you can reset an employee's bank to zero if they are separated from employment for 2 or more months. So essentially, there isn't an exclusion for sort of temporary and seasonal work per se, but it is functionally an exception with those two, the waiting period and the reset.
And is that from the last day they worked or from the date that you clerically separate in whatever system you use to do that?
So the state's position is that separate is going to be construed broadly in this context. So the way we're interpreting it is, the last day they work, essentially, if there's a 2-month break in work, if there's not an expectation that they would work for those 2 months, we can reset to zero, and then we would have the waiting period applied to them again if they are rehired for a subsequent election season.
Thank you. That alleviates my concerns. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, will Clerk Demas please call the roll?
Trustee Sunland,
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane,
Yes.
Trustee Trezise,
Yes.
Trustee Lentz,
Yes.
Clerk Demas, yes. Trustee Wilson,
Yes.
Supervisor Hendrickson,
Yes.
motion passed, sorry.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is item 12C, Township Board 2025 Retreat Proposal. This is brought to us by Treasurer DeShane. He'll give us the rundown on this one.
Sure, thank you, Supervisor. We've done this 4 times in the past 8 years. Trustee Sunland and I have been to all 4 of them. Many of you were at the one we held in 2022. It's a great opportunity for the board to meet in an informal session, discuss how we operate, discuss how we're going to hold discussions, discuss our governing role, and that changes over time. As it says here, we will focus on reaching a consensus on the governing principles by which the board and manager will make decisions. It's quite a mouthful there, and we've got a 4-year term ahead for all of us, and let's make sure we're all understanding which direction we're headed and how we'll conduct ourselves along the way. The full agenda proposed by Mr. Merrill is included. It's a meeting that will be open to the public. It will be held here in this room this year because the fire station is not available, and open to any questions anyone may have about it.
Thank you very much. This is also the first time we're seeing this, so we'll ask for a suspension of the rules if we get a moment. Trustee Lentz.
Move to move to suspend the rules
Support.
For immediate consideration of this item?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Support.
Moved by Trustee Lentz, supported by Trustee Wilson. All in favor of suspension of the rules, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, and here we are. Treasurer DeShane.
I move for Meridian Township to accept the Township Governance Retreat proposal from Larry Merrill for April 12th, 2025, the Meridian Township Hall room at a cost not to exceed $3,075.
Support.
Been moved by Treasurer DeShane, supported by Trustee Trezise. Discussion at this time? Well, I'll add that I found a lot of good value in the 2022 retreat that I attended with my fellow board members. And I do think it is a worthy endeavor to sit down and talk about how it is we do what we do, why it is we do what we do, and how we're going to do what we do all together in one space. And Mr. Merrill has done this, I don't believe you mentioned he's done this a lot, not just for us, but for many others as a former official with the Michigan Townships Association. And so he brings a lot of knowledge and cross-community understanding to bear in these sessions. So certainly appreciate him coming to do this again for us. Seeing no further discussion, Clerk Demas, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Trezise?
Yes.
Trustee Sunland?
Yes.
Clerk Demas, yes. Treasurer DeShane?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Lentz?
Yes.
Supervisor Hendrickson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. That concludes our agenda items this evening. Our next agenda item is item 13, 2025 Board Listening Sessions. Manager Dempsey.
Yes, good evening again. So at the last meeting, I gave a brief verbal update that we wanted to start to think about these listening sessions for 2025. So before you this evening are a few things to consider. I've laid out some potential rough dates for the 3 sessions, looking at early mid-May for an initial one, a second one in late September, early October, and then the third one in early and mid-November. So my hope tonight is to get some direction, starting with those dates, that roughly approximates to where we want to be. What staff would do is then look at our calendar of other events to find, evening sessions that work well to do that. But then the other thought here too was, last year when when you held those sessions in June, they were all held here. And I don't know if there's any merit in considering doing maybe one session somewhere else in the township, and or even doing a session that would be like a virtual session. I don't know that I would propose a hybrid version. My experience in consulting is that hybrid is very difficult. It just doesn't function well. But a solely virtual option might be something that could be beneficial. We heard a lot of our Ready Ride users, the majority of which are dealing with disabilities. I think of people like that this might give them a better opportunity to attend. So that would be one potential consideration. So just looking for feedback from the board if you have strong thoughts otherwise. But again, those 3 sessions, again, maybe doing the later one as it gets colder as the virtual one, and then potentially doing one of the 2 in person at a different location or not. So.
Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you for bringing this forward to us. Having done both the ones here and the ones in person, I greatly preferred the ones we did at the schools in the community. One thing, if we do them here, we're sitting up on the dais and our residents are down there, creates a separation. If we did them in the school libraries, many of them, we were down on little toddler chairs in some cases. We were, I agree, that was too much. But it took us into other neighborhoods, and people, I think, felt more comfortable approaching us because they've been in that library a lot for their kids' functions. Maybe they went to school there. I really support all 3 of them being outside this town hall room. It's good for us to get out of this room, and I think we get better feedback from our residents.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they were certainly more well attended when we went out and got into the areas closer to where the residents live. Just because you're asking about the dates, I think the dates are good. I think, doing this in the summer is not a good idea because folks are out of town and they're on vacation. Goodness, we all would like to be as well. Not to mention the fact that we have a lot of events that occurred in those months that the township staff work hard on. I think given what you've suggested in terms of a virtual meeting, which I think was a really interesting idea, maybe we could try to have one on the south side of the township, one on the north side of the township, and then one virtual. We'd have to, poor Stephen would be working hard to make sure that we're all able to do so in such a way that we can, do it well. But I think that to me would be an interesting breakdown and something new to try to add a wrinkle to the listening sessions that we've done before. Trustee Trezise and then Trustee Wilson.
Yeah, and I think the idea of bookends with or whatever as far as the schedule, but I think if we're going to look at a virtual, it should be here, simply because Stephen can get things working here. And so the other ones, I like being out in the community, but I would suggest that the virtual one be out of here.
Our participation be here.
Yes, our participation would be here, but so that it can be connected easier. Just
Trustee Wilson, then Lentz, then Clerk Davis.
If we have a significant turnout for virtual meeting, it gets pretty unmanageable pretty quickly. I'm really not in favor of having done these kinds of meetings and tried to host these kinds of meetings with 50 or 75 people. It just doesn't work very effectively. I think it'd work if we had a smaller group, but we want a big turnout. So the weather will be good during virtually all of these times. We're not going to deal with snow. I'd rather see us do it in person. I think it's more, I think you react to your audience better, and I think they hear us more clearly.
Trustee Lentz.
Echoing what Trustee Wilson said, as someone who is in meetings regularly, the hybrid almost never works. I cannot think of a single one that does. And in the interest of accessibility, as much as I like the idea of us all sitting here and people virtually coming in, are we then going to limit the people in the seats from engaging? So I like what Trustee Wilson is proposing. I am curious, especially thinking of accessibility, if it would be possible to post online asking residents to submit videos beforehand that we could review, as part of these in-person sessions rather than a virtual. Obviously, I've not attended, or as a board member, I did not attend the last listening sessions, but I understand that there would want to be some back and forth, but I'm just trying to think about folks who might not be able to make it to these, being able to submit things that they want to talk about. But I love that we are doing these, planning on spreading them throughout the community. Talked to many residents last year while campaigning about better township communication. I think this is a great way to start. I saw you're about to say something, Trustee.
No.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I'm listening intently.
Clerk Davis.
Yes, I agree with Trustee Lentz. I think that a virtual option would be interesting and helpful for accessibility. One concern is just how are we going to make sure that everyone is able to speak, who's going to look at the questions, and I think submitting them via email, letters, whatever is the best for our residents can be helpful if we are going to have that option. Can I ask, are these listening sessions considered a special board meeting?
No.
Yeah.
So we don't take
Okay.
action on anything.
Okay, because of that, I know that while talking to residents that a lot of people like that we live stream our meetings. I think that can discourage some people from coming to these listening sessions. But if there was a recording of some sort, I think that could be interesting. So I'm open to a virtual option. I would want to hear more about the logistics of that. I think something I would be more in favor of is going to different areas in our community, such as Hazlet, Okemos, East Lansing, going out to our local libraries. I think that's something, while going door to door, people want us to go to them, not just during campaign season, but throughout the year.
Yes, Treasurer DeShane.
I agree with Trustee Wilson. I think doing a virtual one is not the best use of our time. And I still have Zoom fatigue from the COVID years, and those meetings they're often unmanageable and unproductive. If you have to, then we do it. I think we can reach people that might have a difficult time coming to one of these virtual sessions by offering a free Ready Ride or Spectran bus ride for anybody who asks for it. I'm sure CATA will donate those. They've done it for Election Day. They've done it for lots of other civic duties like that. I'm if we announce that free Ready Ride or Spectrum rides are available to and from the events, I'm very confident CATA will participate with that at no additional cost. So we can include people, get them a ride there and back. I think we benefit a lot more from doing these in person.
Yeah, to the question about the recordings, it's much easier in this room to do that than it would be if we go elsewhere. Right, we attempted to do a township board meeting, I think, in the fire station one time because this room was being renovated, and we couldn't make their video recording work. So I think if we want to do that, they would have to do at least something here. One of us, one meeting here. Understood about the virtual thing. I think if we can find a way for others to participate without doing that, if that's going to be unmanageable, that's fine. I do love the idea about, we've reached out proactively with communications, I think letters to every address in the past. I think if we can offer them an opportunity to submit a question, then, it has the added benefit of giving them an opportunity to ask a question without necessarily being here to do so, or maybe we can pull the most frequently asked ones. And also, we could theoretically, collate and put up, that makes the reporting easier afterward, where we can provide answers both in the meetings and then also provide those FAQs, through our website in case folks can't come to the meetings. So I think that's a really good suggestion from a number of folks who have, made that. I think videos might be tough. I love the idea of it. But I think we could certainly solicit both videos and written questions.
Sure.
Is everyone okay with the dates, the proposed dates
Around that time.
around those times?
The only thing is what night of the week?
Right.
Yeah, that was going to be my concern. Also, for personal reasons, I'll be out of the state in mid-May. So.
Okay. In the past, we've done it on Tuesdays, as we, normally meet for the board meetings. We could certainly do that. Also, you might get better attendance at some points of the year if you do it on the weekend. But we'll leave that. Perhaps, we'll let you go with the staff and come back to us with a final proposal for dates that work for you.
Yeah, okay.
And that you can accommodate staffing. Yes.
I just would like to add that May is really iffy as far as any weekends go, because it's Mother's Day, and then it's Memorial Day, and then it's my daughter's birthday, and
A date we all celebrate.
Not early May.
Okay.
Not the first 2
Clerk
weeks.
Demas.
I'm looking at these general times, and I just grow concerned with election time with May and November specifically. I think like mid-November would be preferable, and May, I think June, well, I know that's around the time that people leave, but I think June might be a better time.
Mm-hmm. We don't have a May election, so that's the good news this year.
This year, yes.
And we're just talking about 2025.
One year for now.
okay.
Right.
Yeah, 1 year, yeah.
Yeah. So good news, we don't have to worry about that just yet.
Perfect, okay. So we're all good then.
Okay. Trustee Lentz.
The expectation, at least from the one listening session I attended, is every board member who can be there will be there, but it is by no means, if it does get scheduled mid-May, I will unfortunately not be able to reschedule, so, and addressing one of the things that Clerk Demas brought up.
Yeah.
Maybe
Trustee Wilson.
anyone who has a conflict. I just said the first 2 weekends in May don't work for me. Second one is Mother's Day. Maybe you could let Tim know.
Yeah,
So that he knows.
Yeah, if there's like
Some
really critical
challenges.
known
Yeah.
barriers, please let me know.
All right. President Shane.
And last time, we did not have all board members at all sessions. We had members who couldn't make them. It's not like missing a
We
township
were
board
only
meeting.
missing one member, I think, at 2 meetings, 2 of the 6.
Point is, we all want to be.
We all want to be there,
there.
but it's not like we're going to be voting on important matters. We should all be there if at all possible.
Right.
They're good meetings, but it's different than a board meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Is that give you some direction there?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And a possible
Trustee Mills.
venue, it could be Okemos Library because it does, the community room does hold 65 to 70 people, but Hazlitt would be out. There is not enough space there to have a meeting that would have 40 or 50 people at it.
There's Murphy School close by.
For one of the schools, right, as long as they're not toddler seats.
Hazlitt football field.
We've all got PTSD from the kindergarten
I
days in the
do.
See
library.
that now.
And back issues in some case.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
All right, that concludes item 13A. All right, our attorneys have been waiting patiently for this moment. So I'm going to make you wait 2 minutes more. We're going to take a quick break and be back at 8:45.
So 15 pages?
What's that?
15 pages is our limit?
That's the goal.
All
All right, we'll bring ourselves back to order at 8:44 PM. And before I turn things over to our attorneys to give us an introduction, I will mention that while it's not listed in the memo, I am asking the board, for the sake of time, to restrain ourselves to the first 15 pages of the personnel policy. As to tackle this whole thing, we might be here until next meeting.
Right.
So the first 15 pages cover basically everything through the employment section. And so now, with that introduction, we'll turn things over. Mr. Karsten.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Hello again, board members. Before you is a draft personnel policy manual, which has been quite a while in the making. I think originally a work group or a committee, I'm not sure which, comprised of the former clerk, trustee Trezise, and HR director Tiedoff, tackled some initial edits, proposals, suggestions as to the personnel policy manual, as they did with the board policies. That eventually came to our office. Myself and Ms. Mills worked with Director Tiedoff and then Manager Dempsey as well more recently to make adjustments to the personnel policy manual. All of our suggestions are incorporated here, so it is a lengthy document. As the supervisor noted, I think a good idea to break it up into chunks, otherwise can become a little unwieldy. Before we get into questions, I'll just say the two things I always say about personnel policies or handbooks, I'm going to use those interchangeably. We want it to comply with the law, certainly. That part is easy. I can do that, no problem. The second piece of it is that it should actually reflect your current practices as a township or the practices you intend to put into place immediately after this goes into effect. So the worst handbooks, the ones I wish we could do over, are the ones where it goes out into the world, the employees see it, they immediately find, XYZ policy that doesn't match at all what they understand to be the township's practice, and that cheapens the entire document, and generally then folks find very little value in it if they know it is not an accurate source of information. So that is why it has been a bit of a labor of love, and why I think it is important that we take time and, as the supervisor suggested, kind of chunk this up so that we're able to go through it to ensure that it reflects what we want it to reflect, especially while we're here kind of taking a very deep dive into it. So with that, I'm happy to field questions on the first 15 pages or point you towards areas of interest, whatever is most efficient for the board.
Okay. Trustee Trezise.
I'm not going to ask questions, but I can tell you that one of the chief goals of the committee that when we met was to shorten this document. I think it was 89 pages long or something like that. Much of it was redundant. Some of it was contradictory. And so I'm looking forward to, as we go through this page by page, if necessary, to running through that prism as to whether we have a useful document or not. And I can't make that decision by my own, and the committee couldn't. So that's why it's good to take the time to look through this.
All right, thank you very much. And certainly we appreciate the hard work of the folks who have brought it to this point, and hopefully we'll be good stewards getting it over the finish line. Trustee Wilson.
May I suggest that we go through this page by page and ask if there are any comments? I have no comments until page 5.
Sure. Well, let's start then with page 1, welcome and introduction. Is everyone happy with the welcome and introduction as it's been laid out?
Yes.
All right, very good. Page 2, we have on this page severability and distributions and revisions. This is pretty boilerplate language that I'm sure the lawyers love. Any questions or issues on this one? Hey, look at that, we're rocking through it. Page 3. This page has equal employment opportunity statement and non-discrimination policy, the HRO, and what I believe to be a section, it'll go into non-discrimination later, but we'll stick with the HRO and the equal employment opportunity statement. Any discussion on this? Treasurer DeShane.
I appreciate you paring down the section B, non-discrimination and fair employment practices. This was more like a political statement than it was a board personnel manual. And I remember when this was passed, and there was a lot of sensitivity to this issue then, but it belonged in a resolution, not in a personnel manual. So thank you for removing this from
It's more of a philosophical statement than it is an action plan for implementing.
Thank you. You said it better than I did. Okay.
And it's all through the document.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Clerk Demas.
So just for clarity's sake, the reason why the open door policy paragraph was taken out was because it's talked about later in the manual?
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
To trustees Trudeau's point, a lot of it was duplicative, and that was the source of that edit, yes.
Thank you. So I did have one question relating to the human rights ordinance. And this is, sorry, this is page 3A.
Okay.
It lists off a number of things which are great to include. It includes condition of pregnancy, marital status, physical, blah, 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 and HIV status. I wonder if we could button that up by referencing medical conditions instead, so that we're not calling out two specific things that doesn't include everything else that might be included in that.
Right. And I think in general, I would agree with you. I do believe that language comes directly from the human rights ordinance, though.
Okay.
That is.
Okay. Well, that certainly is, their language is worthy. I think we could just be more inclusive.
Yeah.
But that's, I guess, an issue for us to take up at a different time if we wish to. Okay. Any further discussion on page 3? Seeing none. All right, page 4 is where we get into the non-discrimination and fair employment practices policy, or what's left of it there. Any discussion? Well, there's actually page 4 is blank, so we'll go into page 5 then for that. Clerk Demas.
Can I ask kind of the reasoning why a lot of information was taken out of the non-discrimination and fair employment practices policy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think exactly to Treasurer Duchesne's point, a lot of it is a little bit more of a political statement, which is not necessarily the function of the personnel policies. That is more proper to be a resolution of the board to announce kind of a broader public policy objective. This is meant to be an employee-facing document that is a little bit more actionable, a little more functional. And again, I think to Trustee Trezis's earlier point, the length of the document is also a concern. The longer this gets, the more unmanageable it is to edit, and the more difficult it is for employees to understand what rules they are subject to. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Other discussion? You said you had something on page 5?
Yes, I do. So it appears after the strike-through that this is all related to criminal convictions, a background check for criminal reasons. Is that accurate?
That's the general purpose of that policy, yes.
Because the township does conduct background checks for educational verification and so on, correct?
Right, I believe that's true, and I think that is specifically addressed in a separate policy later.
Okay, but because we only use background check rather than criminal background check, it's not really clear.
Okay.
And so I would suggest you insert that word. There's several places where it belongs. Yes, if you could do that, I think that would make it much clearer to the reader, because it took me a while to figure out it was only criminal. Thank you.
So perhaps this is a question that's better directed to Director Titoff. But in the first full paragraph on page 5, it says the township shall adhere to a fair chance policy which limits as opposed to prohibits inquiry into conviction history unless required by state or federal law. Am I to understand then that there are other things that we would run a criminal background check for that are not expressly required by state law, and what would those include?
So I'm not sure that there is, other than in somewhat limited circumstances, there's not a requirement to run criminal background checks at all. I think it would likely be required for your law enforcement officers, certainly others in positions of trust. But otherwise, it is in the discretion of the employer what background checks you engage in, to what extent, and what you do with that information, subject to some restrictions on how you are permitted to use that information to make adverse decisions against folks. There are restrictions on that, but broadly speaking, it is within the township's discretion to decide to do it at all, and to what extent to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't mind leaving ourselves some wiggle room here.
Right.
I just was curious why the decision was made to specifically change that language, if there was a circumstance that we needed to, that we were expressly prohibited from in the past.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there is, and I think, again, because it is addressed more specifically in a later policy, I think some of those more specific areas of concern are probably addressed in, I'm not sure if it's called a background check section, but it is something more specific later in the handbook that addresses the subject.
Trustee Trezise.
I think this was modified to address the decision that you don't ask about arrests, only convictions. So it limits the background check except for convictions. Some background checks will, criminal checks will come up with arrest data, whatever. This is saying we will not use that against you in hiring. It's only convictions.
Job-related convictions.
Yes.
That's what I'm reading.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trustee Sunland.
Just from my background with the state of Michigan, and I worked in the Department of Treasury, we were very concerned about any convictions that were related to money.
Of course.
So I think that we have a fair number of positions within Meridian Township that are dealing with financial and money, so I think that that would be useful in some way.
Yeah, and that's consistent with the law. So the parameters, generally speaking, are that we would take into account the nature of the offense, so how serious a crime it is, the length of time since the offense, and then the job relatedness, exactly what you just alluded to. So, a crime of dishonesty or theft for someone handling money is extremely job related. Whether or not, I don't want, excessive speeding tickets or something like
Right.
that is related is a much different question. But yes, that's certainly reflective of the law.
But yeah, I would just think that some sort of financial information should be included, so.
Thank you. Anything else on page 5? Seeing none, we move on. Page 6, hey, here's that open door policy we thought we'd forgotten about. Trustee Wilson.
I have a challenge with the last sentence. This procedure should in no way foreclose the direct discussions department heads have always had on an informal basis. Is the use of foreclose in language? Is that why you're using that word? Because it doesn't seem to appear to be the correct word.
No, I would tend to agree with you. I think that probably should have been corrected and was an oversight, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure it came from the old.
Well, it's not, there's no strike-throughs or changes, so it must.
No, it must have been from the old.
Yeah. All right, any further discussions on the open door policy? All right, page 7. Find ourselves into some full pages now. At-will employment, any discussions on the at-will employment section? Seeing none. Training period, 6-month training period. And we are, I'm sure our supervisors will appreciate we're removing written evaluations every 30 days for the first 4 months. So we.
And not consistent with current practice.
Right, yes.
Back to legal counsels.
We are removing the limitation of employment-related claims. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So this used to be something that we would very routinely, and in fact always put in personnel policy manuals. 4 or 5 years ago, the Michigan Supreme Court handed down a ruling that essentially said something like this: such a significant waiver of employee rights cannot be accomplished through employer policies because the personnel policies are not a contract. So those types of claims can only be waived via a contract, the handbook not being a contract. You could only accomplish this if you had a separate written agreement with each individual employee, which you could certainly do, but is not required of you.
Is that even inclusive of someone who reads, acknowledges, and signs, an agreement to this, or is that?
Yes. So
interesting.
We have to maintain the position that it's in the township's best interest that we not construe the handbook as a contract, because then we would not be able to amend it without the agreement of all employees, essentially. And so, again, it not being a contract, there are certain rights that cannot be waived through the means of the personnel policies.
Thank you. Hours of work, anyone? Yes, Trustee Wilson.
The very last paragraph, it is the responsibility of the director to assure that employees work the required hours and that any absences are properly accounted for on forms. Seems like this is a very important statement that is being struck. Is it elsewhere in the document?
Look at time reporting.
Yes. I would assume, I can't remember specifically if it's captured in sort of a payroll section about, well, so time reporting is on the net.
Okay, that'd be great. Is that, okay, I didn't get that far. Thank you.
Go back up that paragraph if you would. It shows our operating hours, but there's no employee requirement there. I mean, should it also say employees are expected to work these hours? It just.
So there was discussion at one point about listing hours of each individual department, but I don't know that that ever made it into a specific policy. So I think we could certainly do that. I'm concerned that some folks do not work the hours that are prescribed there. So we could list. We don't need to list the hours of operation at all, but we could certainly be more specific about it.
If we're going to list them, it makes sense that we say employees are expected to work these hours, or we can remove them completely. We're currently in a flex time situation, so no one works these hours, okay? So that's the problem, with listing these and then not adhering to them. So we should either remove them or create a policy that says employees are expected to work these hours unless the manager has given a waiver to these, as the former manager did with the flex time policy.
Right, and there is, the flexible work schedule does appear on the next page, and I think some of that is addressed in that policy, but I certainly understand your point that we are stating something that it's essentially irrelevant to all or most of your employees.
Trustee Tresize.
Except I don't think that's what the hours of work paragraph is. It's announcing the hours that the office will be open from 8 till whatever on Monday through Friday and whatever. The actual schedules for the employee to work can flex. They aren't all required to work 8 hours. They don't get paid for the hours they work. But I mean, that really is designed to designate the open hours of the
building.
Yeah.
3/5 of our employees are public safety employees. They work different schedules at all. Shouldn't we have the hours for public safety as well?
No, because the public safety is not open a particular hour. That's open 24 hours a day. This is talking when the building is open to the public. And that there is a staffing need to make sure that employees are
You don't mention
there.
the staffing need though. You just say they're open. But it's implied, I get that. But if you're going to mention the hours, you should say the employees are expected to staff these hours. That's my point. Either state the hours and state the employees are required to be here, or just leave it all completely, because it's standing by its own. It doesn't really, in my mind, make much sense.
Well, I wouldn't want to list all of the hours for every employment because you'd be.
Back to 80 pages.
Yeah. So I think this is, if there needs to be a clause in there, it's the directors can sign work schedules sufficient to provide the services during these open office hours.
That's all I'm asking for. You're right.
Yeah, okay.
Tie this back to the employee. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I think that makes sense.
Yes.
But because it gives flexibility to the director to make sure his operation is, or her operation is open during at least these core hours. They can go longer, but they can't go shorter.
Okay, Clerk Demas?
Yeah, to trustee Trezai's point, I think the hours of work is more like hours of operation.
But it says operate.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, yeah, and so I think that it could be helpful to have a section talking about individual department work hours, but then you run into that risk of it's always changing. So, yeah.
Perhaps it would be simpler, in addition to adding the statement that Treasurer DeShane and Trustee Trezise were discussing, to rename this section hours of operation
Yes.
as opposed to hours of work, to provide some clarity as to what the section actually is about.
Sure.
And then acknowledging that, the staff will find a way to be here to staff during those hours.
Okay.
Are we all okay with that?
Yes.
Terrific. Item, page 8, time reporting. Some discussion on that. Clerk Demas.
Yes, so something that, talking to staff here in our municipal building, something that a lot of people would like to see is remote work options, and I wanted to know if this would be applicable for the flexible work schedule and temporary flexible work hours, if that could be included, or if there's a different process that we need to go through so that people who are approved to work remotely are able to.
Yeah, so I think that would likely be a separate policy. I mean, it could certainly appear within the personnel policies manual. That we would likely want to tackle in a separate policy because there are some parameters that we would want to make sure are in place to ensure that we know, that time is being used efficiently and that folks are aware of our expectations for them, even if they work off-site.
Okay, and if that's approved, then it can be included into this policy,
Yes.
but it's not currently. So, okay, thank
So the
you.
idea is, it's not currently in this draft. If the board wishes to move forward with a remote work policy, we'll do that as a separate action. And it will get folded into this after we approve this document.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Did we talk about time reporting? I don't think we did, but any issues with time reporting?
No.
Seeing none, okay. Flexible work schedule and temporary flexible work hours. Any discussion on this? Everyone's relatively happy with that being there. I will point out that I first noticed it in this section, but we are inconsistent with capitalization for the word department as it relates
Yes,
to
we
department
are.
director throughout the entirety of this document.
Yep.
So if we can do a find and, maybe not a find and replace, but at least a find and scrutinize.
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing no discussion on the flexible work schedule, lunch, rest periods, and breaks at the end of page 8 into page 9. All right, don't see any hands flying up there. Okay. Impermissible use of meal periods or rest breaks. Use them to eat, if you would, please. Okay, emergency closings. No. All right, anniversary date. Nope. Performance evaluations. Trustee Wilson.
The second sentence, the primary purpose of the employee's performance evaluation is to, hang on, I lost my place, inform employees on the quality of their work and how they can improve their work performance. Maybe some employees don't need to improve their work performance, so I would add some kind of a clause like, comma, after work, comma, if necessary, comma, how they could improve their work performance, because otherwise you're telling the supervisors they've got to find something wrong.
I would.
Trustee Sundlin and then Trustee Trezise.
Okay.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, what I'm reading, maybe I have a different copy, but it said the primary purpose of the employee performance evaluation is to maintain communication.
Yes, that's the first clause.
Between supervisor and employee, and I think that is
No, that's good.
the primary reason to maintain communication. It could take it could take different forms, you know. It could,
Yeah. Trustee Trezise.
Yeah, I was going to say that you're right, some may not have to improve.
Right.
But there may be opportunity there for a manager to give advice to an employee about how they could improve their chances to progress to other jobs. What kind of training they would have that make them more marketable, both inside.
Couldn't that be covered under the quality of their work?
It could be. Yeah, I would suggest if you want to change it, if you don't like to inform employees on how they need their work to improve, if necessary.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Cortinas.
Yeah, I'm with the opinion that Trustee Wilson brought up, that I think that you can add in with necessity, because it's just always encouraging our employees to improve, and then finding directors or finding something wrong with the work that's presented instead of working with your staff throughout the whole year. And hopefully by performance evaluation day, it should be all positive because you're working with them to help improve them, their work throughout the year.
exactly.
Trustee Lenz.
The addition on the page 10 for the end of the performance evaluation section, I appreciate the mention of ongoing effort to coach, mentor, and otherwise provide employees with the support necessary. Something that I think about as someone who's worked in organizations of various sizes, what resources they might need in order to fulfill their jobs that they are being evaluated for. And I wonder if there could be inclusion of language. I'd love to hear from Trustee Trezise, who knows legalese a bit better than me, but provide employees with support and resources necessary or something. I'm wondering if, I think I would encourage anyone who's employed at the township to look for areas where maybe there is a meeting they can attend with other municipal government folks doing similar work for the city of Lansing. And, I think that this would be a good place to include that. If we are going to be evaluating people based on their skills, if we don't give them the resources they need, I feel like we are hampering them. I'm just pointing that out. Don't necessarily need it to be in this section.
Trustee Wilson.
I like what Trustee Lentz just said, and this is a very awkward sentence that ends in "with the support necessary." Shouldn't it be necessary support and resources? That makes sense.
Yeah, we can certainly make that change. Yep, and I have no opposition to including resources either. I think that's an excellent inclusion. I think the purpose of it was to make sure that everybody understands that performance evaluations are not a checkpoint every so many months and then we don't have to have any communication. The idea is, of course, that we have continual conversations so that there are no surprises when we get to the formal performance evaluation stage.
Okay. I just real quick, I did want to finish that statement by saying, from the managers meeting that I was able to attend during my full Meridian Day, professional development was stated as one of the things that managers most wanted to see. And I think, anything we can do to encourage that by providing resources of any kind, of course, that is an ad hoc decision to be made. But, I think that we should do everything we can to support that.
Trustee Sunland.
Well, again, tapping into my previous HR experience in the Department of Treasury, I had a little career counseling class that I did like once every, it was 3-hour class, like once every 3 to 6 months for employees to attend because they did not realize they had promotional opportunities. They were kind of stuck in their little jobs, and they didn't realize that they could be promoted or so just some sort of awareness of some sort of career counseling for employees, not to mandate it, but to encourage their development on, maybe they're going to have maybe they're going to earn a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or something to kind of communicate to them that there are opportunities available and that you're supporting them.
Thank you. Anything else on the performance evaluation section? Some good discussion there. All right, promotions. We've tightened up the language a little bit here.
Yeah, I think largely we just reordered it. It was a little, it didn't really explain what a promotion was before it dove into what we might consider when promoting someone.
And we've referenced the collective bargaining agreements at the top, so we're not worried about that.
Right.
All right, personnel files. Everyone's happy with that, okay. Page 11, we are on to Social Security number, privacy and protection. Not a whole lot's changed here. We're not handing out Social Security numbers to the press. Everyone's happy about that. Okay, layoffs and recalls. Seems like the changes made are relatively straightforward in that section.
Yep.
Job vacancies, this is on to page 12 now. Trustee Wilson.
In the very first sentence, it says, when there's a vacancy or position to be posted at the township, the Human Resource Department will be notified and the township will post the position. I believe we should name the role that will post that position being the Human Resource Manager, I assume.
Director, but yeah. Anything else in that section? Okay. Orientation for new employees. This one was a challenge to parse with all the strike through.
That's fine.
I do think, and I don't have any language to specifically request here, but I think I worry that based on some of the feedback we've heard about the challenges of orientation for new employees, that we may want to work with Director Tiethoff and maybe others to find a way to expand upon what they might expect during orientation, right? All this basically says is you'll have orientation to sit down and fill out your tax paperwork.
Right.
And everything that comes after that is something will happen. And it feels like we're not giving it the proper attention. Mr. Dempsey.
Yeah, so what we're doing right now is Director Tiethoff is developing sort of a thorough checklist that we're going to put together almost as a, I won't say internal flyer, but essentially a document internally that people can see what is required, both sort of the first day, first week, first month. So really that progressive orientation, not just the first day. So a more comprehensive sort of operational document that will supplement this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that'll be good because it's one of the critiques I've heard of is that it's very challenging to come on board because there's not a whole lot of structure around what that process looks like. So that's good to hear. Trustee Trezise.
I wouldn't call this orientation for new employees at all. This is onboarding.
Onboarding.
I do agree that there should be some reference to orientation, but maybe in a paragraph that department heads will develop orientation programs for new employees to bring them on board and up to speed within the first month or something like that, with the consultation of the HR director. But I think they're different things.
Yes.
And they probably should be listed differently.
Yeah, any discussion or thoughts on that? Happy with that change? Is he shaking that or nodding heads?
Yep, I think that's perfectly fine. I think as the manager indicated, the specifics about onboarding, I think, are probably better suited to an internal policy document, procedures document, as opposed to this document, although I think certainly we could, if there are additions to this section, it is currently 2 or 3 lines long, so
yeah.
I think could be more robust, certainly.
Well, perhaps if this document has a name, we can reference it before we get to the end of the review of this document.
This could be very simple, saying prior to starting a job, the employee will report to human resources and fill in necessary paperwork to allow systems to go forward or some such thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then orientation would be separate. I agree, I would not list I-9s, W-2s,
No.
W-4s, all that stuff, because those can change.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, hiring of family relatives fraternization. This is on page 12 and 13. A topic everyone's excited to talk about, I'm sure.
It's good.
I think we,
Hard to
yes.
read, but
Trustee Summer.
This feels very, very restrictive. I'm not sure what could be changed with it, but if you've got somebody who, starts dating somebody, and I understand that they have to be professional and they have to maintain the boundaries, but this feels really restrictive because, somebody could, again, I refer to my Department of Treasury experience, and I used to refer to, what was the phrase I used? Some sort of the family relatedness thing going on. A lot of people ended up being hired, and in such a large organization, they could end up being promoted to being, anyway. I just think it's kind of restrictive. I mean, it's like, if somebody is maintaining a professional relationship, I don't know that they should be encouraged to seek another job or to be relocated or something. I think that that's just too restrictive. So I'm not sure how it could be worded.
Yeah, I think the concern, so I don't know that there's a large concern, and I don't know that the policy is addressing a concern other than in supervisory relationships, or at least that's the primary focus. And it's not just the interaction between the two individuals within the relationship, it's also the perception of others around them that I think can really suffer when a supervisory employee, has that relationship with one of their subordinates. Others within that department often feel like there is favoritism, and the person, the individual in the relationship who is not the supervisor often is discounted. Their accomplishments are often seen as being only the result of their relationship with the supervisor, and therefore, even that subordinate employee in that relationship often suffers when that's the case. I certainly understand the concern, and I think we want to have language that gives the township the ability to sort of push these buttons and pull these levers. There may be instances in which it isn't the right thing to do, and so the discretion is built in here. We'd certainly have to be careful about how we exercise discretion in order that it not be, inequitable in any way. But there is a discretion built in to say, okay, this circumstance is perhaps a little different. Maybe we would not take the same action.
Yeah. And I used to laughingly call it the employee engagement program, because it wasn't engagement. There were literally employees that would end up working together and they'd end up being engaged. So they needed to be encouraged to seek something else, but I don't know that we would force them to seek something else, if that makes any sense.
Right, yeah, and certainly the document is giving the township the discretion to do that, but again, you wouldn't necessarily need to exercise that discretion.
Trustee Trezise.
The other thing those types of relationships can lead to is if they break up.
Yeah.
You've got potential sexual harassment, and all that stuff. So it's an awkward position, and it leaves the township exposed if something in that relationship goes wrong. So as a general rule, I would not like a supervisor supervising a romantic relationship or a spouse or their kid. It just makes more sense to move them away so that the perception's not there of favoritism.
It needs to be encouraged, but I don't know that we should we say that we have to?
I think what Mr. Karsten is saying is that the document does give us the ability to act or not act.
Okay.
We have that discretion.
Okay, that sounds good.
And I, for one, trust our team to be able to exercise that in a way that's prudent.
Mhm.
Yes, Clerk Davis.
Yes, this all makes sense to me. The only question I have is the last paragraph. It says the township retains the discretion to transfer, seek voluntary resignation, or terminate related employees, and so on. When it says the township, is that the HR director, the manager, the director heads? What is that? Who specifically has that authority?
Yeah, so I think specifically, Manager Dempsey is the personnel director of the township. So ultimately, the day-to-day personnel decisions rest with the manager's office. So I think in that case, township likely means manager. I think, I don't want to speak for him, but likely would always be in consultation with department heads and, if necessary, in touch with the board if he thought it was prudent.
Okay, and is there a reason why it doesn't specifically say manager, or does it make more sense just to say the township?
I don't know that there is a specific reason. It could say the manager, I think, in that instance, to be more specific.
I think in other ways, the manager has delegated authority to other folks to be involved in that decision-making process. And so, you know, the township may be the manager or his designee or her designee, which in some cases could be the HR director, could be involved in that decision. Perhaps there's a conflict of interest with the manager that would cause him to recuse himself. So I think we're leaving ourselves latitude by keeping it as the township, understanding that's the broad authority of the township organization to address this situation.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Anything else on this section? Okay. Page 14 now, employment classification categories. We get into the really technical and thereby uninteresting section here. This is the stuff that we rely on our lawyers to get right. Trustee Wilson.
Under the section, non-exempt employees are employees whose work is covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act. You're trying to avoid not exempt from by using the word entitled. Are you using that? I just looked it up. Legally, it means to give someone a legal right or just claim to receive or do something. Is that why you're using that word? Because it's a very awkward statement.
I think it was, I'm generally not a fan of defining a word using the same word, so I think that's the change. If we say non-exempt employees mean those who are not exempt from, that is a little clunky. I don't have a specific feeling about the word entitled, although I think technically it is true. If they are non-exempt employees, they are legally entitled to minimum wage and overtime.
They are entitled to the law's requirements. It just is awkward, but I see what you're using it, the context you're using it in. Okay, that was my only comment there.
Anything else on the classifications? All right, on we go. Background and reference checks. We've talked about this a little bit already, and we're coming back to the non-criminal background checks now. I don't see any changes. Progressive discipline.
Good.
Everyone happy with that section? Okay. And then I believe we're into the last little bits here. Separation of employment.
You're on page 16.
Yes.
He did.
I'm sorry, I did say 15, but
Yes, you did.
I also, the table of contents lied to me.
It's a giant lie.
I thought 15 was getting us through that entire section, so.
Yeah, apologies for that. And certainly, just as a general statement, the formatting and the table of contents will be handled. Our legal secretary does this for us all the time with personnel policy manuals, and I assure you she loves doing the table of contents, so she will make sure that that is updated.
With the board's leave, we'll continue through the end of the section just for the sake of ease of coming back to it. Separation of employment. So any issues with voluntary resignation, retirement, abandonment, or termination? Okay, seeing none. Last two, page 18, exit interviews and rehires. I didn't have any concerns with any of that.
I didn't get that far. Because you're on page 18.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Can we reserve the right to make comments on it when
If
we
you
come
find
back?
something objectionable on page 18, bring it next time.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so that'll bring us to the conclusion of this time around. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just for the sake of our own bookkeeping for this, we're going to start on page 19, unless you've got issues with 18, and we will attempt to cover workplace safety, expectations, and time off at our next,
What's the last page number?
well, in the table of contents, the last page number is 31. But it's, you know, if you get to lactation and then stop.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate this.
Yeah,
Yes.
just a question, would it be helpful to just
Snip that
present this
section.
document as is, or do you want us to include tonight's changes incrementally, or do you want to wait till the end?
We can wait.
Let's wait till the end.
Okay.
And actually, would it be helpful to get just the section we're reviewing as opposed to the whole document, or do you want the whole thing for reference?
It's good to bounce back and forth if we need to.
All right.
We'll include as is then.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that direction.
So we're looking at sections 4, 5, and 6 next time around. Okay. Thank you. Finally, this evening, our last discussion item is township millage rates. And we've got a change of venue for Manager Dempsey to go through this one.
Yeah, I'm going to step behind the podium here so I can just go over a very brief slide deck here that summarizes the memo that I put in front of everyone this evening that just gives a summary of the millage rates. This is a sort of a kickoff point in some respect to the discussion that will be forthcoming next month regarding the proposed senior center and community center. It's important to understand sort of the capacity that the township has with respect to its millage rates, where we are today, where we think we might go in the future, in particular with some of our expiring millage rates. As we heard from a resident earlier this evening, there are a number of millages that will be expiring in the coming years, and we'll touch on those briefly this evening. So these are the current millage rates that are approved by the township. So we currently have 10 different levies that the township collects. The first one being the township operating levy that's been in place really since the township became a charter township with the 5 mil levy. You can see the 2025 rate. These are the rates that we currently apply, and those are adjusted based on the Headley Amendment. So in the memo, I provided some information on Headley. I'm not going to go through all of that, but essentially, right, it's an inflationary gauge that keeps what the township can apply in a millage rate based on factors of inflation. And there's links to the MSU extension information if you want to learn more about that. And we can certainly have future discussions on that at another time. That one does not expire, but then the rest of our millage rates do have expiration dates. So the first two after that were originally adopted in 1998, the police and fire protection. Police primarily for personnel, fire for personnel, but also equipment and other operations. And those purposes are spelled out within the resolutions that were adopted at the time that the board at that particular time would have voted to put that on for a public vote. Those were last approved in 2020. And one of the things that I've learned and that you'll see here is that sometimes when the board might have approved to place the millage on an election and then the voters did adopt it, that was sometimes the same year that that millage went into effect, and other times it was the year prior. So it just sort of depends on that particular millage. This is a case where it was voted on in November of 20, and those millages, both for police and fire, were actually implemented that same year. So the memo references 15 years each. It's actually a 16-year millage for both those police and fire when it was last adopted. And you can see both the adopted rate and then the reduction due to Headley. Community services originally in 2002, and then adopted most recently in 2022, and that expires in 2031. So this millage
is for 3 different things: the operations of the senior program, we have recreation activities, and then human services. And there's a proportionate split between that millage. The land preservation millage, which was originally adopted in 2000, again in 2010 at a reduced rate, and then in 2020 at another reduced rate of 0.1. So that went from 0.75 to 0.1 across the 3 approval timeframes, and that one's expiring in 2029. That millage rate in particular, I think, has been one that's been reduced primarily because the township has far exceeded its original goals in the amount of land that it intended to acquire, and the focus now has been on more management and stewardship. So that's a millage rate that I think bears some potential discussion for, at some point, does that just become a small mill to strictly maintain those properties, as we're less and less likely to be acquiring more property. Pathways millage, which was adopted back in 1974 originally, 2016 most recent adoption, and again, that's been a critical tool in terms of expanding the pathways throughout the township. We almost have close to 90 miles of pathways now. Of course, the challenge has flipped from, as we've added those pathways, it's not so much in developing them as it is now the cost to maintain and keep them at a level that our residents expect. And that millage is expiring in 2028. The local roads debt, this was a bond issuance that was based on a $32.25 million bond issuance to do a 10-year road program. We originally expected this to come off the books in 2027, but it's actually coming off this year in 2025, so 2 years early. And the millage rate on the table in the memo you'll see has been projected to be reduced in the final year of that millage rate. So excited about that coming off early. The police and fire debt that was done initially, another one, or excuse me, this is the police and fire supplemental, the 2017. This was done again for police and personnel activities, but also for trying to address the issue with unfunded liability. So trying to raise at the time what was about a 57% funding ratio, which now across the board has been raised to we're somewhere in the low range, mid 70% funding ratio. But we'll be getting our updated actuarial report here in the next month or so. And then for the parks millage, this is the one coming off this year, the one operational millage, so that will expire here in 2025. So we'll have to look at making a decision about this. This is a critical millage that funds, again, the operations of parks as well as improvements. As I mentioned in the memo, there's also been at times the adoption of parks millages that were specifically for physical improvements, so for capital improvements to update parks, playgrounds, ball fields, et cetera. Those have been sort of on and off based on different needs across the parks that the township maintains. And then the last one is the fire station debt, which actually I sort of misspoke. This is the one coming off of the books here in the current fiscal year that originally had been projected to go out a couple more years. So that's been reduced as well. So both the roads and the fire station coming off early, but with the fire station coming off sooner. And then the next table here, actually before I jump to that, so the total township millage rate, if you look at that first long column, as adopted, 11.1 mils, and then just over 8.9 mils. That's the rate when adopted, and then the rollback to Headley. So you can see the number with the debt millages included, and then that bottom right corner, that's really sort of the critical number that I'll talk to a little bit more in just a second. So when we look at future millage rates, this table just lays out what I explained in terms of timing. So you can see when those millage rates sort of peel off. But again, a lot of these are sort of critical
both police and fire protection, the community services, the land preservation, I think is the one that where we might have the greatest flexibility just based on the changing nature of what we're doing. Pathways and the police and fire, also very important. But it's really the parks millage that will be the most immediate sort of consideration for the board. So if the board were to take action on that this year to, get it back in place for 26, again, it would have to be a special election set by the board for this year. Or potentially you could do what we've done, as I indicated, on like the police and fire millages. If there are set elections next year with some general elections in 26, you have the potential to look at the primaries throughout the year and potentially put that issue into the same year. It doesn't give you a lot of cushion should the voters not support it in terms of planning and adjusting for the following year. That raises some risk, but it is available to you for consideration. And then just last slide here is millage limitations and capacity. So not to get too technical, but that limitation that the township is up against is based in state statute and constitution. You have 1/10 of 1% of total assessed value, or 10 mills is the limitation in terms of total mills. That 10 mills equates to $10 of tax revenue per thousand of taxable value. Okay, what does that really mean? If you take a home that, let's say, has $300,000 in market value, half of that is its taxable value in theory. We're not going to get into proposal A right now, but let's just say someone just bought that home, it's uncapped, it's at that $150,000 mark. So 10 mills would generate from that property $1,500 in annual taxes. And that's just 10 mills is the hypothetical here. This isn't the actual tax rate of 50 to 54 mills for residents in the township. Obviously, total taxes would be higher. The millage rate limit does have an exception for bonds and other indebtedness approved by the voters. So that's why that number I mentioned earlier is excluded. So what that yields for us is that our current township max is at that 10.0682, but the 10 mil calculation excludes the debt. So when you take that debt out, our limitation is actually that 8.0629. So what that yields us is a capacity essentially of 1.973 in terms of operating mills. Now, if you go out and issue more debt, that would be accepted from that limitation. So it would not be within that 1.973. But if you do anything on the operating standpoint, it would count against that cap. So it's just a math equation, right, of existing millages, what's coming off, what might get extended, and then what would get added, all excepting for debt. Is sort of the bottom line on that. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of capacity. If you're thinking about it in dollar terms, just to give you some context, I just got the latest numbers from the assessor today. They're wrapping up the 25 assessment roll, waiting for the county to finalize it after the board of review. But we're going to be around for 2025, $2.4 billion in the township for taxable value. When you subtract out the capture districts, like the Downtown Development Authority, Corridor Improvement Authority, veterans exemptions, other exemptions, we're around the 2.35 billion mark, which yields 2.35 million per 1 mil for any given time. So that gives you the order of magnitude. So that's kind of where we're at. Just in terms of that general overview, happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Board members, any questions? We've been here a while this evening. Just for some context, I appreciate your bringing the presentation this evening. Part of the reason why we had asked for this is because in 2 weeks we'll be seeing the Senior and Community Center Task Force's recommendations, as I mentioned during my presentation. And our general understanding from looking at the build cost and also the ongoing operating costs from either option, senior or senior and community center, is going to likely require some amount of millage capture over the next several years. And so I wanted to have this conversation as preface so that we're aware of our millage position overall as from a 30,000 foot view before we have that conversation. We are, as I understand it, going to be working with our attorneys to set up two separate questions if the board chooses to go this direction, well, either direction. One for the build, which would be a debt millage, which would not count against this cap, the 10 mil cap. And the other would be an operating millage, which would be ongoing and would count against the cap. So just wanted to make everyone aware that that's why this was brought in front of the board this evening. It's also just a good primer to have so that we're aware of it. And it brings to light questions about, when are we going to tackle the parks millage? Is that going to be in 2025 or in 2026? So just wanted everyone to be aware that those are a couple of questions we're likely going to need to talk about in the next month or so. Our decisions will have ramifications not just on our millage rate, but also any operational expenses for elections over the next year. If we choose to put something on the ballot in August of this year, we're going to be faced with the choice for the senior and community center. We're going to be faced with a choice of, do we also include the parks millage at that time, or do we wait to another, election, which would have operational costs for the clerk's office, obviously. And so we're going to weigh the pros and cons of that as part of that decision. So that's why we had asked for the presentation. Any other discussion or questions on this, or do we want to handle that when this comes up in about a couple of weeks?
I think it'd be better
Treasurer Jane.
to discuss in the context of the proposals we're looking at, one, where they were at, and applying these to the proposed debt and operations for both the senior center or senior community center will make more sense when we can apply these to an actual proposal.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is comments from the public, item 14. Same rules apply as before. I do have one new card from Chris Clock. Oh, we got a second one. Thank you. Sorry.
Get out of your way.
Chris Clock, 4538 Seneca Drive. I understand with our abutters petition that we had the wrong zoning law. I believe the correct zoning law that applies to townships is MCL 1.25.3402. I want to read a little bit about what it says. For a township or county zoning ordinance, citizens have 7 days after publication of a notice of ordinance adoption is published in a newspaper of general circulation to file a notice of intent for a petition challenging the new zoning ordinance or zoning amendment. With the notice of intent filed and the effective date of the ordinance or amendment on hold, citizens have 30 days to submit a petition to the clerk with signatures amounting to no less than 15% of the total vote cast for governor within the jurisdiction at the preceding general election. If a petition is filed within 30 days and the clerk determines that the petition is adequate, the ordinance or ordinance amendment will be put to a vote by the registered electors in the jurisdiction at the next regular election or special election called for that purpose. The petition and election are subject to Michigan election law, and petition forms are available from county and local election officials. A zoning-related petition requires the Michigan local proposal petition. We will be asking for that petition, so hopefully you all have that available. As we were out talking to the community, it does not seem like an impossible task for a large group of motivated citizens to collect the necessary signatures. And maybe it's time that we the people decided this issue by putting it on the ballot. Perhaps then you would actually listen to the people who elected you. And I think that you need to change the goals of the township, as this ordinance does not talk about, or does not preserve neighborhoods. It's not about affordable housing, and it doesn't support environmental protection. So 4 of you just voted against your own township goals, and the residents will remember this at the next election.
Thank you. Gia McIntosh, and then Jerry Fedewa.
My name is Gia McIntosh. I'm sorry I couldn't make it earlier. I'm currently in prodromal labor and supposed to be on bed rest, but after watching on the live, I felt compelled to come in. I only recently bought a home in Okemos. I specifically chose this home so I could raise my family here. I never would have bought my home or felt like it was a safe or comfortable fit for my family if I knew Ordinance 2025-03 would be approved. I've heard a lot about the water issues tonight and at every other meeting, but very rarely will anyone mention the traffic when they talk in favor of the rezoning. I will no longer feel safe enough to walk with my children on Hamilton, Dobie, or the surrounding neighborhoods due to the traffic this will cause on the roads that are already horrible. I no longer feel like my township cares about my feelings or my neighbors' feelings or what our best interests are. I'm extremely disappointed in this board's decision to approve the rezoning, as it shows just how little your residents who already live here mean. 100 residents have signed petitions showing that they are strongly against this rezoning, and we should have mattered more. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Fedewa.
Good evening again, board members. We've sat through these meetings now, I think, 3 different times. And all the work that you go through to make your careful decisions is very thoughtful. And you folks, all of you are very professional, and many of you have full-time jobs other than this. And you've got so many different things that you're dealing with. And I just want to say thank you for those that had voted in favor of our rezoning, and for those who voted against, because all of you really thought through this as best as you could and made your decision accordingly. And I respect that very much. So I want to thank all of you this evening for doing a wonderful job as being township board members for all of us in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board at this time? Seeing none, public comment is closed at 9:52 p.m. All right, that brings us to item 15, other matters and board member comments. Any other matters before the board this evening? Clerk Demas.
I just wanted to bring up that some members of the board are going to go to a Michigan Townships Association conference from March 31st to April 3rd, and we'll be back for the board meeting on April 3rd, that Thursday. I also wanted to bring up on March 7th, we attended the Ace Hardware store grand opening, and I attended this with Supervisor Hendrickson, Treasurer DeShane, Trustee Trezise, and Trustee Wilson. So that was a wonderful time.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Seeing none, the next item on our agenda is item 16, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Wilson, supported by Trustee Lentz. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We stand adjourned at 9:53 p.m.